They say history is written by the victors, but what about the chapters no one can explain? Across the ages, civilizations have risen and fallen, monuments have been carved into stone, and empires have vanished without a trace. And yet, within the vast scroll of human history, there remain questions that defy time, reason, and even science itself. How did an ancient people move stones weighing hundreds of tons without modern technology? Who sent a cryptic message from a sunken ship that was never found? Why do some burial sites contain artifacts far beyond their era? These are not the plots of fiction, but real events, real locations, real enigmas left behind by those who came before us. From uncracked codes to lost cities swallowed by jungle and sea, some mysteries cling to the past like shadows that refuse the light. So sit back, relax, and let's dive deep into the stories that continue to haunt the historians, puzzle the archaeologists, and captivate the curious. These are the biggest historical mysteries that remain unsolved. In the heart of India, beneath the shadows of ancient palaces and temple spires that have watched the centuries roll by, whispers echo through time. Not whispers of war or conquest, but of knowledge. Hidden, guarded, forbidden knowledge. We begin in the city of Pataliputra, modern-day Patna, once the majestic capital of the Maurya Empire, a beacon of political and cultural power in the 3rd century BC. Towering stone structures, elaborate water systems, and vast libraries once filled this city. It was here, in the midst of its grandeur, that a man named Ashoka the Great ruled with wisdom, and, some say, secrets. Ashoka's reign marked a turning point in Indian history. After the bloody Kalinga War, he renounced violence and embraced Buddhism, devoting himself to peace, governance, and the spiritual welfare of his people. But even as he turned toward compassion, there is evidence, fragmented, cryptic, that he founded something far more enigmatic, a secret society known as the 9 Unknown Men. According to legend, this Council of 9 was created to guard the most powerful knowledge mankind had ever known, not to destroy it, not to share it, but to protect it. Ashoka, it is said, feared that unrestrained knowledge, especially of science, warfare, and the human mind, could bring ruin. That it needed guardians. But who were these men? What did they know? Accounts of this secret brotherhood are sparse and scattered, often passed down through folklore, fragments of texts, or second-hand testimony. The French writer Louis Jacoliot mentioned the 9 in the 19th century, long before the idea gained global attention. But it was in 1923, with the publication of The 9 Unknown by Talbot Mundy, a British writer and former intelligence officer, that the mystery began to stir imaginations across the world. According to these stories, each of the 9 men was entrusted with a book, each covering a distinct branch of forbidden knowledge, from the science of propaganda to the secrets of anti-gravity, from microbiology and the power of sound to time travel and communication with extraterrestrial life. Could these be mere fiction, the fanciful musings of writers blending mysticism and science fiction? Or is there something older, deeper at work, something hidden in India's vast historical archives, temples, and oral traditions? One of the supposed books is said to contain the science of physiology and touch, methods to kill a man with nothing more than a subtle pressure on a nerve. Another, the key to creating invisible weapons of war through vibration and frequency. A third, a volume on alchemy, the transmutation of metals, and the secrets of immortality. It would be easy to dismiss these as myth, but India's ancient texts, such as the Vedas and the Mahabharata, describe weapons and technologies that seem, to modern eyes, shockingly advanced. Flying machines called vimanas, projectiles that could burn entire cities to ash. Are these metaphors or memories? In 2001, a team of Indian scientists exploring ancient metallurgy discovered a column in Delhi that had not rusted in over 1,600 years. Some began to speculate, was this knowledge part of what the Nine Unknown preserved? The more one digs, the more the boundaries blur between verifiable history and tantalizing legend. There is no physical proof of the Nine Unknown Men, no scrolls, no artifacts clearly bearing their seal, only passing references and stories that appear time and again across centuries and cultures. Some say the society still exists, operating in silence, guiding scientific progress from the shadows, ensuring dangerous discoveries are either contained or never made public. Others believe they dissolved long ago, their books lost or hidden in remote monasteries, waiting to be found by someone worthy or reckless enough to use them. What gives this legend a peculiar weight is the recurring theme across civilizations of secret keepers, from the Egyptian keepers of the House of Life to the European Rosicrucians and even the Vatican's sealed archives. There is a human impulse to guard knowledge, to protect the sacred from the profane. Could the Nine Unknown Men simply be India's version of this archetype? A cultural reflection of our collective fear of misused knowledge? Or is it something more literal? In recent years, whispers of the Nine have surfaced in conspiracy circles and fringe documentaries, claiming that the group influenced major scientific breakthroughs, nuclear energy, wireless communication, even genetic engineering. But no credible evidence ties any of these developments to a hidden society. And yet, the story persists. Why? Perhaps because it speaks to something deep within us. The idea that somewhere in the folds of history there exists a guiding hand, protecting us not from external threats, but from ourselves, from what we might do if we knew too much too soon. Could such a group exist? Is it even possible, in our modern era of leaks and digital transparency, to conceal such immense power? Or have the Nine adapted, as legends often do, living not in shadows but in plain sight, disguised as think tanks, scientific councils, or anonymous advisors to governments? No one knows, and maybe that's the point. Because whether the Nine Unknown Men were real or symbolic, the questions they raise are just as powerful as any answers we might find. What knowledge lies just beyond our reach? And who decides when, if ever, we're ready for it? As we leave behind the veiled world of secret knowledge and the Nine Unknown Men, our journey now takes us deeper into the sands of time, to a place where history and myth converge beneath the sun-scorched landscape of ancient Mesopotamia, southern Iraq. Here, in the arid basin where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers once nourished a cradle of civilization, lies a forgotten ruin, silent, desolate, sunken into the dust of centuries. Eridu. At first glance, Eridu appears like many other archaeological sites across Mesopotamia. Scattered mud brick walls, eroded ziggurat foundations, shards of pottery half buried in the sand. But this place is different. To many scholars, Eridu is not just any city. It is the first city. According to the Sumerians, it was here that kingship descended from heaven. Here that civilization was born. The Sumerian king list, an ancient text etched into stone and clay, begins with the words, "After kingship had descended from heaven, it was in Eridu, a city of divine origin, a city older than recorded time." Founded sometime around 5400 BC, Eridu grew into a center of spiritual life and early statehood. It housed the great temple of Enki, the god of fresh water, wisdom, and creation. At its peak, Eridu would have stood as a beacon on the Mesopotamian plain, with grand ziggurats rising above reed houses, priests conducting rituals beside sacred pools, and fishermen working the now-vanished marshlands that surrounded the city. And then, it was gone. What happened to Eridu? Historians tell us that, over time, environmental changes likely altered the course of rivers, cut off water supplies, and turned once fertile land into desert. As the marshes dried and the population shifted, cities further north, Uruk, Lagash, rose in prominence. Eridu was slowly abandoned. Not destroyed, not conquered, just left behind. But the story is far from simple. In the archaeological record, Eridu shows a puzzling pattern of continuous rebuilding. Over 18 distinct levels of temple construction lie beneath the main ziggurat, evidence of repeated dedication to this sacred site across more than 2 millennia. And yet, sometime after 2000 BC, the city was inexplicably deserted. Worship ended, the structures crumbled, the heart of the city, the temple of Enki, was left to the wind and dust. Why? One theory points to the rise of political power centers elsewhere. As dynasties shifted and trade routes evolved, Eridu may have lost its significance. Another explanation is climatic. The encroaching desert, the salinization of soil from over-irrigation, and a declining water table made continued habitation impossible. But not everyone is convinced that natural decline fully explains Eridu's fate. The city's disappearance left a spiritual and cultural gap in Sumerian memory. Later texts refer to Eridu with reverence, as a sacred city of the past, as a place where gods once walked among men. According to the Eridu Genesis, one of the oldest surviving flood myths, it was here that the gods first created human beings. And it was from here that the Great Flood swept across the world. Did the myth of the flood originate from an actual environmental catastrophe? Could rising sea levels or river floods have swallowed Eridu, giving rise to the stories that would later echo through Babylon, the Torah, and the Epic of Gilgamesh? Or was there something more, something hidden beneath the surface of legend? A few fringe theorists have gone further, suggesting that Eridu's abandonment coincided with a deliberate withdrawal of divine or extraterrestrial presence. They point to the unusual reverence given to Enki, often depicted not only as a creator god, but as a bearer of science, language, and technology. Some interpretations of Sumerian texts describe him as emerging from the Apsu, a cosmic, subterranean sea. Others note his association with serpents, knowledge, and symbols that resonate far beyond Mesopotamian mythology. Could Eridu have been more than a city? A site of advanced learning? A portal to something unknown? Of course, such theories are speculative, based on interpretations of metaphor-rich texts, poetic symbolism, and the inevitable gaps in our understanding of ancient worldviews. But even among mainstream scholars, Eridu raises questions that remain unanswered. Despite multiple excavations, much of the site remains unexamined, buried beneath layers of sediment and the challenges of modern geopolitics. Satellite imagery hints at broader structural patterns, roads, canals, and enclosures that suggest Eridu may have once been far more extensive than what is currently visible on the surface. And then there's the troubling issue of alignment. The temple structures, like many in ancient Mesopotamia, seem oriented to celestial bodies, the sun, the moon, specific stars. Was this simply religious symbolism, or was Eridu also an ancient observatory? As with so many of the world's earliest cities, what we know is overshadowed by what we do not. Eridu stands as both a beginning and an end, a place where civilization emerged and where one of its first great lights quietly flickered out. Was it climate that drove the people away? Political change? A forgotten war? Or was Eridu simply never meant to last, a city created for a divine purpose, fulfilled and then abandoned to myth? we may never know. But as the winds blow across its sun-baked stones, and as archaeologists continue their slow, careful work, one cannot help but wonder, what still lies buried beneath the ruins of Eridu? What stories remain to be uncovered? And if Eridu was truly the first city, what does its vanishing tell us about the fragility of everything that came after? As the ruins of Eridu sink beneath layers of myth and sand, our journey shifts westward, toward a land where the desert preserved more than it buried. Egypt. Here, where the golden cliffs of the Theban hills rise above the western banks of the Nile, time appears frozen. The Valley of the Kings stretches silently across the arid ground, its limestone faces hiding tombs carved into the very bones of the earth. Kings and queens of Egypt's golden age lie here, shrouded in centuries of dust and ritual. Yet among the names we can trace, Ramses, Seti, Tutankhamun, one remains elusive: Pharaoh Thutmose II. His rule was brief, his legacy overshadowed by those who came before and after. And yet, the mystery surrounding his final resting place has lingered for centuries, defying time, logic, and even modern science. Who was Thutmose II? Official records portray him as the fourth pharaoh of Egypt's 18th dynasty, ascending the throne around 1493 BC. The son of Thutmose I and the husband of the formidable Hatshepsut, his reign lasted perhaps no more than 13 years. During this time, Egypt remained stable. No grand monuments were built. No major wars were waged. It was, by most accounts, a quiet kingship. But what happened after his death is anything but quiet. By tradition, pharaohs of the new kingdom were entombed in hidden chambers beneath the cliffs, where elaborate tombs held riches, sacred texts, and spells for the afterlife. And yet, for Thutmose II, no such tomb has ever been found. In 1881, a cache of royal mummies was discovered in Deir el-Bahari, a hidden shaft tomb containing dozens of pharaohs and noble dead, hastily reburied by ancient priests during a time of tomb robbing and crisis. Among them was a mummy identified as Thutmose II. But here, the mystery begins to unravel. The body had no accompanying inscriptions, no funerary goods, no tomb of its own, just linen wrappings and the faint memory of royal blood. The mummy itself raises more questions. Scholars who examined it noted signs of mistreatment. Its chest caved in, its face mutilated. Some suggested the damage occurred during reburial. Others speculated about post-mortem political vengeance. And yet, a deeper uncertainty remained. Was this truly Thutmose II? Without his original tomb, without an undisturbed context, the identification is, at best, tentative. So where, then, was he buried? Some Egyptologists believe his tomb lies still hidden somewhere in the Valley of the Kings, perhaps beneath debris or near existing structures. The valley, after all, has revealed new secrets even in recent decades. Hidden chambers, unmarked shafts, tombs previously misidentified. Could Thutmose's final resting place simply be overlooked, waiting beneath the dust? But other theories stretch further. One suggestion is that Thutmose II was never given a formal burial at all. His reign, though legitimate, may have been politically fragile. Some evidence hints that his powerful wife, Hatshepsut, began consolidating authority even before his death. Was his burial rushed, improvised, or, more radically, deliberately erased? Ancient Egypt was no stranger to posthumous manipulation. Kings were routinely removed from records, their names chiseled from monuments, their tombs repurposed or desecrated. If Hatshepsut sought to legitimize her unprecedented rule as a female pharaoh, would she have hidden or redirected attention from her predecessor's grave? And then there are stranger possibilities. A handful of fringe theorists argue that the mummy found at Deir el-Bahari was a decoy, that the real Thutmose II was interred elsewhere, in a secret tomb, perhaps one connected to Hatshepsut's own monumental mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari, or even further afield, outside the traditional royal necropolises entirely. Some point to inscriptions hinting at tombs yet undiscovered in the cliffs west of the Nile, tombs deliberately concealed by the priests of Amun to protect royal bodies from thieves and political unrest. Could Thutmose II's tomb be one of these? If so, what treasures or secrets might still lie sealed inside? Another curious detail lies in the style and structure of Tomb KV-42, a rarely discussed site in the Valley of the Kings. Initially thought to belong to a queen, some scholars have suggested that it might once have been constructed for Thutmose II, but later repurposed. The evidence is inconclusive, but it adds to the atmosphere of shifting plans, hurried decisions, and hidden truths. The search for Thutmose II's tomb is not just an archaeological challenge. It is a window into the fragile power structures of ancient Egypt, where legitimacy, legacy, and the afterlife were all woven tightly together. A pharaoh's tomb was not only a place of rest, but a political statement, a declaration of divinity, a fortress for the soul. What does it mean then when that place is missing? Does it signal shame, a quiet coup, a forgotten king caught between two giants, his father, Thutmose I, and his wife, Hatshepsut? Or is it simply a casualty of time? The cliffs remain silent. The tomb entrances stare blankly from the valley walls. And somewhere, perhaps beneath the feet of tourists, perhaps beyond the reach of our tools, the true burial place of Pharaoh Thutmose II may still lie untouched, waiting to be discovered. Until then, the question lingers, like the dry wind that winds through the Valley of the Kings. Where does a forgotten king sleep, when history refuses to let him rest? As the shadows of forgotten kings linger in the tombs of Egypt, we journey now into a different realm of mystery, not buried in stone, but scattered in fragments of thought. We leave behind the sands of Thebes and find ourselves in the rugged hills of ancient Ionia, where the wind carries whispers of a voice lost to time. The city of Ephesus, nestled near the coast of what is now western Turkey, once stood as a crossroads of commerce, philosophy, and empire. Marble streets and columned facades once lined the city, echoing with the footsteps of traders, scholars, and sages. But among the many voices that rose from this city, one stands apart, enigmatic, elusive, and in many ways still unread. Heraclitus. Known to some as the obscure and to others as the weeping philosopher, Heraclitus lived in the late 6th and early 5th centuries BC. He was a thinker whose ideas would ripple through centuries, challenging, inspiring, and unsettling those who followed. But today, nearly everything we know about Heraclitus comes to us not from his own pen, but through quotations and interpretations by others: Plato, Aristotle, and later Roman thinkers. His original writings are gone, lost. All that remains are scattered fragments, sentences, sometimes only half of one, phrases preserved in the margins of texts written centuries later. Like bits of pottery unearthed in the dirt, they suggest a once whole vessel now broken beyond repair. How did this happen? Why would the writings of such a pivotal thinker vanish so completely? According to ancient sources, Heraclitus composed a single work, On Nature, a treatise said to be written in deliberately cryptic language. He deposited it, legend tells us, in the great temple of Artemis at Ephesus, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Was it an offering, a warning, or perhaps a challenge to future readers? The temple itself was later destroyed, burned, rebuilt, and ultimately lost to earthquakes and conquest. If Heraclitus's manuscript ever resided within its walls, it may have perished along with its marble columns and golden altars. But there is another possibility, one that has captivated scholars and seekers alike. What if the text wasn't destroyed, but hidden? Heraclitus, by all accounts, was not a man concerned with popularity or accessibility. His writings were famously dense, composed in aphorisms, paradoxes, and riddles. He scorned the masses, ridiculed other thinkers, and held that truth was not for the many, but for the few. Could he have concealed his work on purpose, left it in a form so obscure that only a select few could decipher it, or placed it somewhere remote, out of reach of casual readers, trusting that only those worthy of understanding would find it? Mainstream historians generally agree that the text was lost through the slow erosion of time, misplacement, neglect, perhaps even active suppression during later shifts in philosophy and religion. Yet the fragments that remain have fueled endless fascination. You cannot step into the same river twice. The way up and the way down are one and the same. Nature loves to hide. What was Heraclitus really saying? Was he describing a world in constant flux, a universe governed by change, tension, and balance? Or was he pointing towards something deeper, something concealed within the structure of reality itself? Some modern interpreters see in his words the seeds of quantum theory, chaos theory, and Eastern metaphysics. Could he have grasped insights thousands of years ahead of his time? Or are we simply reading into his poetry meanings shaped by our own desires? A few fringe thinkers go further still. They speculate that Heraclitus may have been the custodian of a more ancient wisdom, perhaps drawn from Egyptian, Babylonian, or even pre-Hellenic sources. Could On Nature have contained knowledge passed down from older civilizations, encoded in cryptic language for those who knew where to look? And if so, was it truly lost, or deliberately removed? The mystery deepens when we consider that Heraclitus's philosophy stood in sharp contrast to many of his contemporaries. While other thinkers sought order, clarity, and permanence, Heraclitus emphasized impermanence, conflict, and the hidden nature of truth. His was not a philosophy of comfort, but of confrontation. Did this make him dangerous? In a world where ideas were power, where rulers consulted oracles and philosophers advised kings, could his work have been suppressed, either by religious authorities or rival schools of thought? We cannot know for certain. What we do know is that over 100 fragments have survived, collected, preserved, and puzzled over for more than 2 millennia. Scholars have compiled these pieces into modern editions, attempting to reconstruct the outline of On Nature. But the result is more mystery than clarity. It is like trying to map a constellation with only a handful of stars. In the silence of the Ephesian ruins, beneath the shadow of vanished temples and broken stone, the questions still echo. What did Heraclitus write that the world was not ready to hear? And where, if anywhere, might his original words still be hiding? In some forgotten chamber, in an uncatalogued scroll beneath layers of soot and history, or in plain sight, woven into the very fabric of philosophical tradition, misunderstood and mislabeled? We may never recover the full text, but the fragments, like embers in the dark, still burn. And perhaps that is the essence of Heraclitus himself, not a man to be fully understood, but a voice to provoke thought, to unsettle, to remind us that some truths are not lost, only hidden, waiting for us to learn how to see. From the cryptic fragments of Heraclitus scattered across time and continents, we journey now along the ancient arteries of knowledge itself. Eastward, toward the Silk Road, where not only silk and spices once flowed, but ideas, philosophies, and the distant echoes of the stars. At the edge of the Gobi Desert in western China lies the remote town of Dunhuang. Surrounded by wind-sculpted dunes and golden cliffs, it stands like a sentinel between worlds, where traders, monks, and pilgrims once crossed paths on their way between east and west. Here, nestled into the sandstone cliffs just outside the town, lies one of the world's most breathtaking archaeological treasures, the Mogao Caves. For centuries, these caves, hundreds of them, were carved and painted by Buddhist monks and artisans. Murals of heavenly realms and earthly kings adorn the walls. Sacred texts, worn by use and reverence, were copied and preserved. And in one of these caves, sealed behind a hidden wall, a secret waited in silence for nearly 1,000 years. Discovered in 1900 by a Taoist monk named Wang Yuanlu, the sealed library cave, Cave 17, contained a trove of more than 40,000 manuscripts, scrolls, and relics. Among them was something extraordinary, a delicate silk scroll, over 6 feet long, covered in stars. It is known today as the Dunhuang star map, and it may be the oldest complete star atlas in the world. Dating from sometime between the 7th and 10th centuries AD, the map displays over 1,300 stars grouped into recognizable constellations, plotted with remarkable precision. The heavens are divided into zones, and constellations from both Chinese and, some argue, non-Chinese traditions appear. Each star is marked not only by location but by name, classification, and significance. At first glance, it appears as a straightforward piece of medieval astronomy, a sophisticated work, certainly, but not unique in the annals of early science. Yet as scholars and astronomers have examined the Dunhuang star map more closely, questions have begun to emerge. How did the creators of this map attain such astronomical accuracy without the benefit of telescopes? Why do some of the depicted star positions align better with older epochs, possibly centuries before the accepted date of the scroll's creation? And, most intriguingly, what sources were used to compile this celestial guide? Mainstream historians note that Chinese astronomy was, indeed, highly advanced. As early as the 4th century BC, Chinese astronomers recorded solar eclipses, tracked planetary movements, and catalogued thousands of stars. The Han Dynasty's Book of Silk, for instance, includes detailed records of constellations and omens. Yet the Dunhuang star map is different. It appears not merely observational, but synthetic, a compilation of knowledge accumulated across cultures and centuries, drawn together with a precision that seems ahead of its time. Some scholars have pointed to evidence that Indian, Persian, and even Greco-Roman influences may have shaped the map. The Silk Road, after all, was more than a trade route. It was a corridor of ideas. Could the star map reflect a convergence of Eastern and Western astronomical knowledge unified in a single, elegant document? Others notice peculiar features. Certain constellations on the map do not conform to standard Chinese traditions. Some even resemble patterns known in Mesopotamian or Hellenistic systems. Is this coincidence? Or does it suggest a more complex cultural exchange, one perhaps lost to the ravages of time? And then come the more speculative questions. Some researchers have wondered aloud, was the Dunhuang star map purely an astronomical tool? Or was it also spiritual? Its proximity to religious texts, its symbolic motifs, and the inclusion of mythic creatures suggest that the stars were not just observed, they were interpreted, worshipped, embedded within a cosmological framework that saw the sky not as empty space, but as a living realm. Could this star map have been used not merely to chart the heavens, but to divine fate, understand the soul, or even chart the passage to enlightenment? A few fringe theorists go further still. They note that some stars and constellations in the Dunhuang scroll appear in groupings not aligned with the night sky as seen from Earth. Could this be an attempt to represent the sky from a different perspective? A symbolic one? A metaphysical one? Or even a view not of the sky we see, but of one remembered? Of course, such interpretations are speculative, and many questions remain grounded in the more terrestrial challenges of dating, authorship, and intent. We still do not know who created the Dunhuang star map. Was it the work of a single monk astronomer, a team supported by the Tang imperial court, or a traveling scholar from further west, carrying fragments of knowledge from other lands? The text that accompanies the scroll is sparse. The names are mostly silent, and the paper trail, if one ever existed, has long since blown away into desert dust. What we're left with is a remarkable artifact, elegant, precise, mysterious. It now resides in the British Library, far from the silent caves where it once lay hidden for centuries. Scholars continue to analyze its content, to map its stars against modern coordinates, to understand its layers of influence. But the deeper questions, the ones that stir something ancient in us, remain unanswered. Why was it hidden? What deeper purpose might it have served? And what other scrolls, perhaps still sealed behind walls, buried in forgotten caves or mistaken for something ordinary, might hold further pieces of this celestial puzzle? The sky, after all, is eternal, but our understanding of it is not. And somewhere, perhaps in the vast corridors of the Silk Road, or in the hands of a long-forgotten monk, the missing pages of humanity's dialogue with the stars still wait to be found. From the star-strewn scrolls of Dunhuang, where the cosmos was charted in ink and silk, we drift into another shadowed chapter of history, one not carved in stone or painted on cave walls, but whispered through the corridors of vanished faiths. Our path now leads to the heart of ancient Mesopotamia, to the remnants of a movement that once spanned continents and dared to unify the light of all religions under a single truth. Here, amidst the arid plains of Sasanian Persia in the 3rd century AD, a man named Mani walked a path few dared to tread. A prophet, a philosopher, and an artist, he claimed to speak not just of one revelation, but of all. Christianity, Zoroastrianism, Buddhism. Mani saw them not as separate faiths, but as scattered rays of a single divine light. His vision gave birth to Manichaeism, a syncretic religion that flourished for centuries from the Roman Empire to China. At the heart of this global spiritual movement was a single sacred object, a vessel said to contain the writings, teachings, and possibly even the remains of Mani himself. It was known as the Ark of Mani, and today it is missing. Described in early Arabic and Persian sources, the Ark, sometimes called the Manichaean coffer or chest of the living spirit, was a richly decorated reliquary, possibly crafted of wood or precious metals, enshrined in a temple known as the Denawars, the House of Light. Inside, it was believed to contain Mani's original scriptures, his personal illustrations, his garments, and sacred relics. Some sources claim it held his bones, following his execution by the Sasanian Emperor Bahram I around 274 AD. But beyond reverence, the Ark served another purpose. It was the focal point of Manichaean ritual life, paraded annually in processions known as Bema ceremonies. It was not merely a relic, it was a living symbol of Mani's presence, and the embodiment of the divine dualism he preached, the eternal struggle between light and darkness. So what became of it? After Mani's death, the Manichaean faith faced severe persecution, first under Zoroastrian rulers and later under Christian, Muslim, and Confucian regimes. Its texts were burned, its followers scattered, its temples razed. And somewhere amid this centuries-long suppression, the Ark of Mani vanished from the historical record. No mention of it survives in late Manichaean sources. No fragments of it have been unearthed in archaeological digs. No confirmed copies of its contents, if they ever existed in duplicate, have been found. Was it hidden by followers, buried deep beneath ruined temples in Mesopotamia or Central Asia? Was it destroyed by zealous hands, its sacred artifacts lost to fire and time? Or could it have traveled eastward, along the same Silk Road that carried Manichaean thought into the Chinese Empire, where it endured for centuries in secret? Some clues, though faint, point to the east. Manichaean texts preserved in Chinese and Uyghur dialects, discovered in caves near Turfan and Dunhuang, speak of sacred images and scrolls brought from the west. Among these are references to a radiant chest and a vessel of the prophet. Scholars disagree whether these terms describe the same object as the original Ark or later symbolic reinterpretations. Others suggest that the Ark may have been dismantled intentionally, its pieces spread across Manichaean communities to preserve the faith in exile. A fragment of painted silk here, a page of illuminated scripture there. If so, the Ark may no longer exist as a singular object, but as scattered, unidentified artifacts lying in museum basements or private collections, stripped of context. Still, some speculate more boldly. A few fringe theorists propose that the Ark of Mani was never purely a physical container. They argue it was an esoteric concept, a cipher for an inner gnosis, a secret knowledge passed only to the elect. In this view, the Ark's disappearance is not a historical event, but a metaphor. The light hidden within the world, lost amid material chaos, awaiting rediscovery by the spiritually awakened. Others take a more literal and more controversial stance. They draw comparisons to other sacred arks in ancient traditions, the Ark of the Covenant in Jewish lore, the Buddhist Banaka boxes preserving sutras, or Zoroastrian containers of divine fire. Could the Ark of Mani have shared origins with these traditions? Could it have been more than a reliquary, perhaps a receptacle of knowledge or even of power? Without physical evidence, we are left only with echoes. Arabic historians writing centuries after Mani's death mention the Ark as part of polemics, condemning its veneration as idolatrous. Chinese records, though more respectful, describe only ritual objects, never a definitive location or description of the Ark itself. It remains an enigma. Today, in the ruins of Seleucia Ctesiphon, ancient capital of the Sasanian Empire, the wind moves through broken arches and half-buried corridors. The temple sites once linked to Mani are unmarked. Their contents, if any remain, lie beneath layers of history, war, and erasure. And yet, somewhere between the mythic and the historical, the Ark of Mani still casts its shadow. What truths might it have held about the life of a prophet who claimed to unite all faiths? About the early, unfiltered teachings of a religion that saw all existence as a battlefield between light and dark? What might still be buried in forgotten vaults or temple ruins, waiting to be unearthed? And if it were found, what would we see when we opened it? A glimpse of a lost religion? A treasure of human thought? Or perhaps something that was never meant to be opened at all? The mystery remains, silent but not forgotten. From the vanished Ark of Mani and the lost wisdom it may have held, we move now into silence far more ancient, toward a landscape where the winds speak of lives long erased, a place few travelers visit, where the golden sun scorches the stones by day and shadows stretch endlessly across the sands at night. The Bayuda Desert. Located between the Great Bend of the Nile in modern-day Sudan, the Bayuda lies hidden between the fertile riverbanks of Nubia and the arid expanse of the Sahara. To the untrained eye, it appears lifeless, harsh, empty, vast. But look closer, and the desert begins to whisper. Among the volcanic craters and basalt hills, scattered across remote valleys and rocky plateaus, lie hints of something extraordinary. Thousands of stone circles, burial mounds, and megalithic alignments, structures whose origin remains a mystery. No written records, no names, no known cities, only shapes carved in stone, left behind in the stillness. Who built them? When? And for what purpose? Archaeologists have only begun to scratch the surface. Satellite imagery has revealed vast networks of circular tumuli, some simple heaps of stones, others arranged in concentric rings with radiating spokes, eerily symmetrical and clearly intentional. Many are aligned with the stars or cardinal directions. The resemblance to other ancient megalithic structures, like the stone circles of the Sahara or even Britain's Stonehenge, has sparked comparisons, though no direct connection has been proven. Radiocarbon dating, where available, suggests these structures may be over 2,000 years old. Some may even date back further, to the distant shadow of the 3rd millennium BC. And yet, no central city has been found. No temples, no palaces, no surviving script. Only the burials remain, silent in the sun. Mainstream scholars propose these were likely built by nomadic or semi-sedentary peoples, possibly precursors to the Meroitic or Kushite cultures that flourished along the Nile. Perhaps they were burial sites for local chieftains, or astronomical markers used by desert-dwelling tribes. But even this leaves us with more questions than answers. Why are so many of the structures clustered in precise patterns? Why do some form geometric alignments that stretch for miles across the desert? Were these sacred pathways? Ritual landscapes? Primitive calendars? And what of the people themselves? In a region once considered peripheral to the grand narratives of Egypt and Nubia, could there have existed an entirely separate cultural horizon, an unrecorded civilization whose influence has been lost beneath centuries of wind-blown sand? Some fringe theorists have speculated wildly. They suggest that the builders of Bayuda's stone circles may have been survivors of the so-called Green Sahara, a time around 9,000 to 4,000 BC when the desert was lush, dotted with lakes, and home to thriving human settlements. As climate changed and the rains receded, did these people retreat into the highlands of Bayuda, preserving fragments of their culture in stone? Others point to the curious similarities between the Bayuda mounds and tumuli found in distant parts of the world, from Central Asia to North Africa to even Northern Europe. Is this a case of independent development, converging on similar forms through shared human needs? Or does it hint at forgotten networks of migration, trade, or ritual exchange that once spanned continents? Still more speculative are the voices that tie Bayuda's enigmatic remains to lost kingdoms referenced only briefly in ancient texts. The land of Yam, for instance, a territory mentioned in Egyptian inscriptions from the 6th dynasty, was said to lie deep in the south, beyond Nubia, beyond known maps. Could the builders of Bayuda's stone circles have been part of this elusive culture? Or were they the ancestors of a people whose name has yet to be uncovered? Despite modern advances, the Bayuda remains largely unexplored. Political instability, remoteness, and environmental challenges have kept most archaeological teams away. A few expeditions have cataloged sites, but comprehensive study has barely begun. Even so, the evidence is mounting. In 2011, an Italian research team documented hundreds of previously unrecorded tumuli using satellite imagery, structures with clear geometric layouts, and even what appeared to be causeways linking them. These were not random piles of stone. They were designed, they were planned, and they were meant to last. But what they signified remains unclear. Was the desert once a sacred space where the dead were laid to rest under the open sky, close to the stars? Were these monuments part of an ancient system of celestial observation? Or do they point toward a worldview no longer comprehensible to us? Rituals and beliefs that left no written word, no oral tradition, only the hard language of stone. The Bayuda Desert does not yield its secrets easily. The wind continues to sweep across the craters and cairns. The sun continues to bleach the stones. But somewhere beneath that silence, beneath the volcanic rock and endless dunes, an entire chapter of human history may lie waiting. What might we discover if we listen more closely, if we map more thoroughly? If we finally stand not at the edge of this desert, but within its heart? And if we do, will we find a forgotten people, or a forgotten story written across the land, not in ink or parchment, but in the very bones of the earth? The mystery remains. As the winds of the Bayuda Desert brush over forgotten stone circles and vanished cultures, we now step into a world shaped not by sand or stone, but by prophecy. From the harsh silence of the desert, we move to the hushed corridors of ancient Rome, where the fate of empires once balanced on the turn of a page now lost. At the heart of early Roman civilization stood the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus on the Capitoline Hill. Built in the 6th century BC, it towered above the fledgling city like a sentinel. And within its fortified inner chambers, guarded by the priesthood and restricted to the highest officials, was one of the most enigmatic collections of sacred texts the world has ever known: the Sibylline books. These were not just scrolls of myth or folklore. They were treated as oracles, divine instructions passed down from the gods themselves to be consulted only in times of extreme crisis, war, plague, famine, and unrest. When Rome trembled, the Senate turned to the Sibylline books for guidance. And time and again, these cryptic prophecies shaped the destiny of the Republic, and later, the Empire. But then, they disappeared. The original Sibylline books are gone, completely, without a trace. What were they? Who wrote them? And how could something so sacred, so central to Roman governance, simply vanish? According to legend, the books first entered Roman history during the reign of Tarquinius Superbus, Rome's last king, around the late 6th century BC. A mysterious woman, an old crone with piercing eyes, approached the king with 9 books. She claimed they contained divine prophecy. When he refused to buy them at her steep price, she burned 3 and offered the remaining 6, at the same cost. Again, he declined. She burned 3 more. Only then, with 3 remaining, did he purchase them, at the original price. She vanished. And the books, the last of their kind, became Rome's most guarded treasure. Whether the story is allegory, myth, or truth, the books were real enough to the Romans. Entrusted to a group of elite priests known as the Duoviri Sacris Facundis, later expanded to 15, they were kept sealed, brought out only by decree of the Senate, and interpreted in hushed tones, often triggering massive public rituals or changes in law. But what did the books actually contain? Their exact content remains unknown. Written in Greek hexameter, the verses were said to be layered in metaphor and obscurity. Some accounts suggest they included foreign customs and rites, many of which were later adopted into Roman religious practice, such as the worship of Cybele, the Great Mother from Anatolia. Others claim they warned of eclipses, disasters, or divine displeasure, yet historians are divided. Were they genuine prophetic texts, political tools cloaked in mysticism, or something else entirely? Regardless, they remained untouched by the public. Their mystery was part of their power, that is, until they were lost. In 83 BC, a fire ravaged the Temple of Jupiter. Among the destruction was the inner sanctum, and with it, the original Sibylline books. Despite efforts to reconstruct them, collecting prophetic fragments from across the empire, the originals were never recovered. But the question lingers: Were they truly destroyed? Or was their disappearance orchestrated? Some scholars suggest the fire may have been convenient. Rome was, at the time, in the throes of political upheaval. The dictator Sulla had just marched on the city. The authority of the Senate was crumbling. Could the books, so tied to state religion and legitimacy, have been seen as dangerous, either by those who wielded them or those who feared them? Were they deliberately removed from the record? Alternatively, could a priest have smuggled them out before the flames took hold, believing they were too sacred, too powerful to leave behind? We have no surviving fragments, no copies, no translations. And yet, references to the Sibylline prophecies continued for centuries. Roman authors such as Livy, Virgil, and Cicero mention the books. Later, Christian writers too speak of Sibyls, prophetesses whose visions seemed to anticipate the coming of Christ. Some even claimed the Church absorbed Sibylline wisdom into its early theology. Is it possible, then, that remnants of the original books were preserved, rewritten, hidden within later religious texts, stripped of their origin but not of their message? A few fringe theorists go further still. They point to striking similarities between prophecies ascribed to the Sibyls and those in ancient Mesopotamian or Persian traditions. Could the Sibylline books have been fragments of older wisdom, brought westward through trade, conquest, or even secret religious movements? Others wonder whether they were never truly books at all. Could the term Sibylline books have referred not to scrolls in the traditional sense, but to a collection of oral traditions, encoded rituals, or mnemonic devices passed down among a hidden priesthood? If so, perhaps what burned in 83 BC was only the outer shell, not the secret within. Today, scholars must rely on second-hand references and the vague echoes of influence that ripple through Roman religious policy. But the books themselves, their verses, their true power, their mysterious origin, remain lost. A fragment of thought once held sacred by one of history's greatest empires. What did they truly say? Did they warn of an empire's fall, of a coming savior, of distant civilizations or celestial events? And more haunting still, is it possible that somewhere, beneath the ruins of the Capitoline Temple, in a sealed vault, or hidden among other ancient texts mislabeled and forgotten, the Sibylline books still exist, waiting to be read, waiting to speak once more? As the gold veins of great Zimbabwe fade into silence beneath ancient stone, we now turn our gaze east, toward the lush river deltas and dense jungles of Southeast Asia. Here, where the Mekong River empties into the sea in a vast fan of silt and winding channels, the land seems timeless. Rice paddies stretch into the horizon, birds skim the still waters, and the humid air hangs heavy with the scent of earth and rain. But beneath this green abundance lies the memory of a forgotten kingdom, a place once hailed as the first great civilization of mainland Southeast Asia, a land called Funan. According to Chinese chronicles, Funan flourished from the 1st to the 6th centuries AD. It was a maritime power, a crossroads of commerce that connected the Indian Ocean to the South China Sea. Chinese envoys wrote of its canals and palaces, its gold ornaments and Sanskrit inscriptions. Indian texts speak of a distant kingdom rich in jewels and elephants, ruled by men well-versed in dharma and trade. And yet, today, there is no capital to be found, no grand monuments, no royal tombs carved in stone. Where did Funan go? The name Funan itself is not local. It comes to us through Chinese records, perhaps a transliteration of an unknown native word now lost. The people of Funan left no known texts of their own. What we know comes from foreign eyes, Chinese diplomats, Indian traders, and, much later, French colonial archaeologists who tried to piece together its existence from buried fragments. but the puzzle is incomplete. Funan's supposed heartland lay in the lower Mekong Delta, in what is today southern Vietnam and Cambodia. Archaeological discoveries near Os Eo, an ancient trading port unearthed in the 1940s, reveal a cosmopolitan society. Roman coins, Persian glassware, Indian sculptures, and Chinese ceramics have all been found here. The diversity of these finds suggests a kingdom deeply embedded in international trade well before the rise of Angkor or Srivijaya. Canals, some still visible by satellite, crisscross the land, evidence of sophisticated water management and planned agriculture. Brick temples, once mistaken for later Khmer architecture, have been dated to the early centuries AD. It seems clear, a great kingdom was here. And yet, around the 6th century AD, the voice of Funan goes silent. Chinese sources stop mentioning it. The archaeological footprint wanes. The name disappears, replaced by a new power, Chenla, a kingdom that would later give rise to the Angkorian Empire. But the transition is not well understood. Was it a conquest, a migration, a rebranding, or did Funan simply dissolve, transformed from within? Mainstream historians offer several possibilities. One is environmental. The Mekong Delta is a living, shifting landscape. Floods, siltation, and rising seas could have changed the viability of key settlements, forcing populations to move inland. Trade routes may have shifted, favoring new centers of power farther north or west. In this view, Funan did not collapse. It evolved, absorbed into newer kingdoms, its name forgotten, but its people still present. But that answer feels too neat for many. Because for a kingdom described with such grandeur, Funan left surprisingly little behind. Where are the inscriptions naming its kings? Where are the detailed records of its battles, its cities, its temples? Why do we know more about Funan from Chinese envoys than from any local text or legend? Some scholars suggest that Funan may have been less centralized than once believed. Perhaps it was not a single unified empire, but a network of port polities, linked by trade and culture, but loosely governed. In such a model, Funan could fade without a dramatic fall. Its constituent parts could simply merge into rising powers like Chenla, leaving little evidence of rupture. Others point to a possible cultural shift. Funan was deeply influenced by Indian traditions. Its rulers adopted Sanskrit titles, Hindu cosmology, and even Indian-style temples. But by the 7th century, a distinct Khmer identity began to emerge. Could the name Funan have been abandoned as part of this shift in self-perception? Could the political elite have chosen to erase or rename the past as a new cultural narrative took shape? And then, there are more speculative voices. Some theorists question whether Funan was even a single place. Could it have been a name assigned by foreign observers to a variety of loosely affiliated trading cities across the Delta? Could it have referred more to a region than a state? If so, then its disappearance may be a misreading of history, an artifact of limited data rather than a real collapse. Still others go further, suggesting the possibility of lost cities yet to be unearthed beneath the dense vegetation and ever-changing waterways of the Delta. Remote sensing technologies have already revealed buried structures and settlement patterns once invisible to the eye. Might entire urban centers remain hidden beneath rice fields and mangrove swamps? And what of the people? If Funan disappeared, did its population vanish too? Or did they simply become the early Khmers, carrying with them traditions, technologies, and stories that would later re-emerge in Angkorian greatness? Could echoes of Funan live on in myths, in language, in the uncarved stone of rural shrines? Today, the Mekong continues its eternal flow. The land is fertile. The Delta breathes with life. But somewhere beneath its shifting surface, the memory of Funan sleeps. Its palaces drowned, its ports buried, its kings unnamed. Was it erased by conquest? Or by time? Is Funan waiting to be rediscovered, not in texts, but in the soil? Or was it never what we imagined? Less a kingdom and more a crossroads, one that vanished as all crossroads do when the travelers moved on. The kingdom of Funan remains an enigma, its legacy scattered, its name borrowed, its heart still unfound. And so we ask again, what lies hidden beneath the waters of the Mekong? And what story has yet to be told beneath the reeds and ruins? As the echoes of Funan vanish into the waters of the Mekong, we turn west, toward the dry, wind-carved hills of southwestern Iran. Here, where the Zagros Mountains rise in layered waves from the plateau, the earth hides secrets beneath every stone. The land feels old, older than empires, older than memory. It is a landscape of silence, broken only by the rustle of dry grass and the cry of desert birds. But once, long ago, this desolate terrain cradled a city of immense significance. Anshan. Mentioned in ancient inscriptions and royal lineages, Anshan was one of the principal cities of Elam, a civilization that thrived long before Persia claimed the plateau. Elam is often overshadowed in modern history by its more famous neighbors, Sumer, Babylon, Assyria, and later Persia. But it was no less vital. It was a culture of builders, scribes, and kings. And Anshan, its heartland city, stood at the crossroads of myth and empire. But where is Anshan now? In the 3rd millennium BC, Elamite scribes referred to Anshan as a powerful political center. It was more than a city. It was a kingdom, even a dynasty. Later, it became deeply intertwined with the rise of Persia. Cyrus the Great, founder of the Achaemenid Empire, proudly styled himself King of Anshan before ascending to rule over all of Persia. And yet, despite its prominence in both Elamite and early Persian history, the precise location of Anshan remains uncertain, its streets lost to time. Many scholars believe that Anshan lies beneath or near modern-day Tale Malian, a sprawling archaeological mound in Fars province. Excavations have uncovered evidence of continuous habitation stretching back to at least 4000 BC. Tablets written in Elamite script, cylinder seals, and monumental architecture all point to the site's ancient importance. For decades, the consensus among archaeologists has been that Tal-e-Malian is Anshan, or at least a part of it. But the evidence, though persuasive, is not definitive. There is no monumental inscription declaring, "This is Anshan." No royal stele standing guard over the ruins. Instead, the identification rests on fragments, clay tablets that mention the name Anzan, linguistic similarities, geographical inferences from later Persian records. Tal-e-Malian might be Anshan, or it might be a nearby center, a cousin city, or something else entirely. If Tal-e-Malian is Anshan, then why is so little of the grandeur described in Elamite texts visible? Where are the great palaces, the ziggurats, the city walls of a capital? Is it that they haven't been found, or that they were never built in the ways we expect? Some scholars propose that Anshan may not have been a single fixed city, but a shifting center of power, more of a territorial designation than a defined urban settlement. In this view, Anshan referred to a region controlled by a ruling dynasty rather than a single urban core. But that raises further questions. How did such a flexible identity sustain dynastic prestige? And what then are we truly searching for? Others entertain more speculative ideas. Could Anshan have been deliberately hidden, or its ruins intentionally destroyed by rival powers seeking to erase its legacy? Might it lie buried beneath an unexcavated ridge, camouflaged by the passage of millennia? Or could it have been relocated entirely? Its population moved, its name carried to a new site by force or necessity. Elamite culture was distinctive, separate from the Mesopotamian systems to its west. Its language remains only partially deciphered. Its writing system evolved independently. Its religion and iconography differ markedly from that of its better-known neighbors. In this sense, Elam, and by extension Anshan, feels like an island, isolated, complex, and not yet fully understood. And yet Elam was not insular. It traded widely. Its rulers married into Mesopotamian dynasties. Its scribes recorded treaties and conflicts. Its warriors sacked Babylon itself in the 12th century BC, and through it all, Anshan is invoked again and again as a seat of power. But after the 6th century BC, Anshan begins to vanish from the record. Cyrus the Great, its last famous prince, transferred the center of gravity to Pasargadae and later Persepolis. The Elamite identity, already fading, was gradually absorbed into the rising Persian world. Anshan, once a beacon of Elamite and early Persian kingship, was no longer mentioned in inscriptions. It was as if the name, and the city, had been swallowed by history. What happened? Did shifting power dynamics lead to its decline? Was it abandoned due to ecological pressures, changes in water supply, agricultural failure, or seismic activity? Or was it simply rebranded, forgotten not because it failed, but because it was succeeded? The ruins at Tale Malian may yet hold the answer, but excavation is slow. Political realities and funding limitations have left large portions of the site unexplored. Ground-penetrating radar, aerial surveys, and satellite imagery reveal anomalies, possible structures beneath the surface, patterns too regular to be natural. Yet the deeper we dig, the more complex the picture becomes. Anshan remains just out of reach. A name etched in clay. A title adopted by kings. A ghost city that shaped empires and then faded from view. Was it a cradle of Elamite science and kingship? A Persian springboard to greatness? Or something else entirely? Something we have not yet learned to recognize. For now, we walk the dusty ridges of Fars, scanning the horizon for answers. The wind stirs the sand, and the stones remain silent. But beneath the silence, something waits. And so we wonder, will the true Anshan ever be uncovered? Or is it meant to remain buried, a secret guarded by the earth itself? As we leave the dust-covered ruins of ancient Anshan behind, our journey takes us west into the arid, windswept expanse of the Middle East. Here, in the shadows of forgotten fortresses and crumbling caravanserais, a whisper of Roman steel lingers, oddly placed, oddly silent. It is said that somewhere beyond the frontiers of the Roman world, a legion vanished. In 53 BC, Marcus Licinius Crassus, wealthy, ambitious, and eager for military glory, led a Roman army into the heart of Parthia. The campaign was meant to rival the conquests of Julius Caesar and Pompey. Instead, it ended in disaster. At Carrhae, near the border of modern-day Turkey and Syria, Crassus's legions were decimated by the horse archers of Parthia. Historians record that 20,000 Roman soldiers died and 10,000 more were taken prisoner. Crassus himself was killed, igniting one of history's most humiliating defeats for Rome. And yet, that's not the end of the story. What happened to the survivors, those 10,000 captured legionaries? The fate of these men has puzzled scholars and stirred imaginations for centuries. Roman sources fall mostly silent after Carrhae, offering no definitive account of their whereabouts. Yet in later years, scattered references emerge, cryptic, fragmentary, and provocative. The Greek historian Pliny the Elder, writing in the 1st century AD, mentions a strange town in the east, occupied by descendants of Roman prisoners. Another account from the Chinese Honshu speaks of a mysterious group of foreign warriors encountered on China's western frontier in 36 BC, soldiers who fought in a fish-scale formation, a term some interpret as a reference to the Roman testudo, or tortoise formation. Could these be the same men? Some scholars suggest that after the battle, the Parthians may have marched the Roman prisoners eastward, settling them along their volatile eastern frontier, perhaps as military colonists. The town of Margiana, near present-day Merv in Turkmenistan, is one such possible location. From there, the theory continues. These Roman soldiers, skilled and battle-hardened, may have later been captured again, this time by the Chinese during their conflicts with the Xiongnu, and forcibly resettled even further east. Enter Liqian, a remote village in China's Gansu province. In the 20th century, Western explorers visiting Liqian were struck by the appearance of some locals: light-colored eyes, high-bridged noses, and taller-than-average builds. These features, combined with the village's oral traditions and its name, thought by some to be a derivative of legion, sparked a media frenzy. Could Liqian be the final resting place of Crassus's lost legion? Genetic studies conducted in the early 2000s showed no clear evidence of Roman ancestry among the villagers, though the research was limited and its results remain debated. Chinese historical records mention no Roman settlement in Liqian, but the presence of foreigners along the Silk Road during this period is well documented. Skeptics argue that the entire theory is a romantic fabrication, a case of wishful thinking fueled by circumstantial evidence and coincidental resemblances. The lack of Roman artifacts, inscriptions, or architectural influence in Liqian supports a more cautious view. But the mystery persists. Why do some ancient Chinese texts refer to Western warriors who fought with unorthodox tactics? Why do Roman sources mention Eastern deployments that seem to vanish from the record? And why, even centuries later, do echoes of this lost legion appear in unexpected places? The mainstream historical consensus remains restrained. Most scholars agree that the captured Romans were likely settled in Parthia, possibly as auxiliary troops or laborers, and eventually assimilated into local populations. Their identities, like so many others in the ancient world, faded into the shifting sands of history. Yet that answer feels incomplete, because something about this mystery endures. It captures the imagination, not simply because it is unresolved, but because it bridges two worlds: Rome and China, East and West, empire and empire. The notion that a band of Roman legionaries might have crossed the vast deserts of Central Asia and stood, centuries before Marco Polo, at the edge of the Middle Kingdom feels almost too extraordinary to believe. And yet, history is filled with such improbable intersections. Archaeologists continue to search. From the Iranian plateau to the Taklamakan Desert, from the ruins of Merv to the valleys of Gansu, the quest to trace the lost footsteps of Crassus's legion continues. Stone walls are studied, pottery shards examined, ancient roads retraced, and still, no definitive trace has been found. Were they absorbed into Parthian society, becoming farmers, builders, or soldiers for a foreign crown? Did they serve in distant battles, defending cities they'd never imagined? Or did they vanish entirely, lost to time, their story surviving only as legend? For now, the fate of the lost legion remains one of history's great riddles, a gap in the narrative where myth and fact intertwine. And so we ask, did Roman legionaries once stand beneath the silk banners of the Han dynasty? Did they dream of home as they gazed upon alien mountains? And might their bones still lie buried, forgotten, in a land that never knew their names? The silence of the desert holds no answers, but perhaps, somewhere beneath the dust, an answer waits. As we leave behind the dust trails of Roman soldiers wandering foreign deserts, our journey veers south, across continents and centuries, to the high plains of southern Peru. Here, under a sky of unbroken blue and a sun that bleaches the earth by day, stretches a canvas like no other. A barren expanse known as the Nazca Desert. At first glance, it is an empty place. Winds howl across dry soil. The heat is oppressive. The land gives nothing easily. Yet from above, from the eye of a bird or a god, a startling vision unfolds. Etched into the desert floor are vast figures. Hummingbirds, monkeys, spiders, trees, and geometric shapes, so large they are nearly invisible from the ground. These are the Nazca lines, geoglyphs drawn with astonishing precision, spanning more than 400 square kilometers. Created between 500 BC and 500 AD, they are among the most enigmatic creations of the ancient world. Who made them? Why did they draw images that can only be fully appreciated from the sky, when the culture that created them left no evidence of flight? We know the Nazca people, who inhabited this region more than 2,000 years ago, were master engineers. They constructed underground aqueduct systems, puquillos, to bring water to an unforgiving land. They developed ceramics, textiles, and rituals woven deeply into the rhythms of nature. And yet, of their greatest achievement, they left no written explanation. Archaeologists have studied the lines for decades. Some figures stretch hundreds of feet long. The largest, a pelican, is over 900 feet in length. Others are simple lines, long, straight, and eerily accurate, spanning vast distances. Some intersect. Others radiate like spokes from invisible hubs. The technique used to create them was deceptively simple. Dark rocks on the desert surface were scraped away, revealing lighter soil beneath. The dryness of the region and the lack of erosion have preserved them remarkably well. But simplicity of method does not explain the complexity of purpose. One of the earliest and most enduring theories comes from German mathematician Maria Rieke, who dedicated her life to studying the lines. She believed they were a giant astronomical calendar, aligning with the solstices and key celestial events. Indeed, some lines do seem to point toward significant solar and lunar risings. The Nazca may have used the desert as a sacred observatory, an open sky temple tracking the rhythms of the heavens. But not all the lines align with stars. Others, like the intricate animal figures, defy astronomical interpretation. Why would a civilization that struggled to survive in a desert devote such enormous effort to art that could not be seen? Some researchers have turned to the Nazca people's greatest challenge: water. In a landscape where rainfall is almost non-existent, managing water was a matter of life and death. Some theorists suggest the lines may have functioned as ritual pathways, processional routes used in ceremonies to invoke rain. The drawings of animals and plants could represent water-linked deities or fertility symbols. Walking these lines may have been an act of prayer, a spiritual journey across sacred space. Yet even this explanation does not account for the full range of shapes nor the scale. Nor does it explain the effort required to maintain and protect them for centuries. This opens the door to more speculative interpretations. Could the Nazca lines have been messages to the gods, meant to be seen from the sky? Some suggest they were part of a religious worldview in which deities resided above, in the sun, moon, and stars. The images, then, might have served as offerings, celestial graffiti for divine eyes. Others go further. In the mid-20th century, a popular fringe theory emerged, suggesting the lines were ancient runways or navigational aids for alien visitors. Proponents of this idea point to the immense scale and precision, as well as the apparent lack of immediate earthly utility. These claims, though widely criticized by mainstream scholars, persist in public imagination. There are also hypotheses of acoustic paths, routes used in sound-based rituals, where drums and chants might reverberate along the flat terrain in structured ways. Others look at the lines as territorial markers or maps of underground water systems. Still others propose they were ritual mazes designed for pilgrims to walk in meditative patterns, symbolically entering into communion with nature or spirit worlds. And yet, despite all these theories, no single explanation accounts for all the forms and figures. The combination of function and symbolism, the blend of geometry and natural imagery, the interplay of space and silence, it all resists a definitive conclusion. Why does the hummingbird point so perfectly toward a mountain range? Why are there dozens of spirals, yet only one human figure, a towering form known as the astronaut, etched into the side of a hill, gazing outward with arms raised? Was it a map, a ritual center, a cosmic mirror, or was it something entirely different, something we have not yet imagined? In recent years, new technologies have revealed previously unknown lines, buried beneath the sand or too faint for human eyes. Drones and satellite imagery continue to uncover new figures, ones that had remained hidden for thousands of years. And with each new discovery, the mystery deepens rather than resolves. Perhaps that's the nature of the Nazca lines, meant not to be solved, but contemplated. A puzzle inscribed in the desert. Not as a code to be cracked, but as a dialogue between earth and sky, people and gods, past and future. And so we ask, what were the Nazca really trying to say across these empty plains? And if we could somehow hear the silence they left behind, would we finally understand as the mystery of the Nazca lines fades into the silent wind of the Peruvian desert? We cross oceans and centuries once again, this time into the heart of ancient Rome. Amid the ruins of marble forums and crumbling columns, where the whispers of empire still seem to echo through time, there is one name that looms above all others. Gaius Julius Caesar, a conqueror, orator, and political genius, a man who redefined the fate of Rome and whose death marked the twilight of a republic. His deeds are carved into stone and inked in the scrolls of history. But among the many relics associated with his life, one remains conspicuously absent: his sword. Not just a weapon of war, but an extension of the man himself. This was no ordinary blade. Described by ancient sources as a finely crafted Spanish steel gladius, it was likely gifted or acquired during Caesar's early campaigns, perhaps in Hispania. Some historians believe it may have been his companion in the Gallic Wars, in the civil war against Pompey, and ultimately during his rise to dictatorship. But what became of it? Caesar's final moments are as dramatic as any tale in Roman history. On the Ides of March 44 BC, he was assassinated by members of the Senate, stabbed 23 times at the base of the Curia of Pompey. He fell, not in battle, but beneath the statue of his former ally and rival, Pompey the Great. In the chaos, his cloak was torn, his body left bleeding on the steps. But what of the sword he so often carried? Some accounts suggest he was unarmed that day, lulled by a false sense of trust. Others say he may have carried a concealed blade, as was not uncommon for a man who had made countless enemies. But if Caesar's sword was with him, it vanished with his death. No confirmed artifact ever surfaced. No museum holds it. No tomb yielded it. No record conclusively describes its fate. Why does this matter? Because unlike crowns or coins, a general's sword holds symbolic weight. It is the tool of power and survival, etched with history, forged in the fires of ambition. Alexander's sword became legend. Charlemagne's, a relic. Even Attila's blade, perhaps mythical, was revered as a weapon of divine favor. And Caesar? For all his impact, no blade bears his name. Some researchers believe the sword may have been confiscated by the conspirators as a trophy, passed among them in secrecy before being lost in the political purges that followed. Others wonder whether Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal general and friend, recovered the sword after the assassination, perhaps preserving it for Caesar's adopted heir, Octavian, the future Augustus. If so, could the blade have been buried with one of them? Or even melted down and reforged into a new symbol of imperial rule? Another theory points to Caesar's will. He left personal items to his friends and family. Could the sword have been gifted to a trusted ally? If so, it may have disappeared into a private collection or been taken far from Rome, into the provinces, or even beyond the borders of the empire. There are even wilder claims. Some fringe theorists suggest the sword survived for generations, hidden away by secret societies or preserved by those who believed Caesar was not only a ruler, but a divine figure. In these tales, the sword becomes a relic, imbued with mystical significance, linked to the founding of the empire and its ultimate destiny. In the 19th century, a sword surfaced in southern France, near an ancient Roman camp. It bore markings attributed to the late Republic. For a time, rumors swirled that it might be Caesar's lost weapon, carried west during his Gallic campaigns. But further study revealed it was likely of a later date. The mystery endured. In another case, a private collector claimed to possess a Roman gladius, supposedly passed down through generations from a noble Roman family. The blade was elegant, the hilt inlaid with gold. But without provenance, without proof, it was just another ghost among the artifacts of time. The absence of the sword is itself a powerful silence. Unlike Caesar's writings, his commentaries on the Gallic Wars, or his marble likeness preserved in busts, the sword is something tactile. It once cut through the fog of war. It helped shape the course of history. Its weight was felt on battlefields from Britain to Greece, and yet we cannot find it. Could it lie buried beneath centuries of rubble in Rome, hidden in a forgotten chamber beneath the Palatine Hill? Was it lost during the looting of the Roman treasury and later invasions? Or does it rest in the earth somewhere far from home, buried with a soldier who dared not reveal what he had taken? More than a weapon, Caesar's sword represents a connection between myth and man. A reminder that even those who seem larger than life once gripped cold steel, once trusted in the strength of a blade when all else fell away. Perhaps, in the end, its disappearance reflects something deeper, the idea that power, like empires, does not last forever, that even the sharpest of swords, in time, succumbs to rust, to earth, to memory. And so, we ask, is Caesar's sword truly lost, or is it waiting to be found? Will it someday emerge from the soil to rewrite what we know, or will it remain, like so much of the past, a mystery the present can only glimpse from afar? As the echoes of Roman conquest fade into the dim corridors of history, our path leads eastward, across the Mediterranean, toward the shimmering coast of northern Africa. There, under the golden haze of the Egyptian sun, once stood a city unlike any other, a place of ideas, of flame, of silence and light. Alexandria, founded by Alexander the Great and crowned by one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, Alexandria was a beacon of knowledge. Within its legendary library, hundreds of thousands of scrolls were said to be housed, texts from Greece, Persia, India, and beyond. Mathematics, astronomy, medicine, philosophy, all preserved under a single roof. And among its brightest minds was a woman whose name has outlasted both empire and flame, Hypatia. Born around 360 AD, Hypatia was the daughter of Theon, a mathematician and philosopher. She was more than a scholar. She was a teacher, a thinker, and in many eyes, a symbol of wisdom itself. Draped in flowing robes, she walked the marble streets of Alexandria unafraid, addressing crowds of men on complex theories of geometry and the cosmos. But Hypatia left behind something that still eludes us: her writings. We know she wrote. We know she calculated. We know she taught. Her students, including prominent Christian thinkers like Synesius of Cyrene, spoke of her with reverence. She is credited with commentaries on Diophantus, Apollonius, and possibly Ptolemy's Almagest. Her work, it is said, refined the mathematics of the ancients, improved astronomical instruments, and advanced knowledge of conic sections. And yet, not a single original text has survived. What happened to them? The tragedy of Hypatia is often recounted in blood. In 415 AD, she was brutally murdered by a Christian mob, torn from her chariot in the streets, dragged to a church, and killed in a way that stunned even her enemies. It was a moment historians have described not just as the death of a person, but the symbolic end of the classical world. After her death, many of the philosophical schools in Alexandria began to fade. Pagan thought, of which Hypatia was a guardian, was increasingly viewed as heresy. Her works, some suspect, were destroyed as part of this suppression. But were they all burned? Or were some hidden? Some historians believe that fragments of her work may still exist, buried under false names, embedded in the writings of her students, or lost in the tangle of later scholastic texts. Synesius, for instance, refers to her correspondence and her thoughts on philosophy and science. Did he preserve her teachings, disguised as his own? Others wonder whether copies of her writings were once stored in the Serapeum, a daughter library of the Great Alexandrian Library. When the Serapeum was destroyed by Christian zealots in the late 4th century, it is possible that scrolls containing Hypatia's commentaries perished in the fire. If so, her legacy might have vanished in a single night of flame and dust. And yet, tantalizing hints remain. Some suggest that her reworking of Diophantus's Arithmetica helped preserve that work into the Islamic Golden Age, where mathematicians like Al-Khwarizmi built upon its concepts. Could her annotations lie dormant in medieval Arabic manuscripts, mislabeled or misattributed? Could they be sitting even now in a library in Fez, Istanbul, or Tehran, waiting to be deciphered? A handful of fringe theorists go further. They claim Hypatia was part of an esoteric tradition, one that guarded ancient knowledge stretching back to Egypt's earliest dynasties. In this view, her writings were not merely commentaries on Greek texts, but encoded treatises on lost science, celestial mechanics, or even philosophical keys to sacred geometry. These theories, while unprovable, reflect a hunger, the sense that something vital was lost when Hypatia's voice was silenced. And then, there are the manuscripts that have disappeared from view. In the 18th and 19th centuries, European collectors and explorers brought back thousands of papyri and scrolls from Egyptian tombs and ruins. Some were stored, others sold. A few were lost in transit or in wars. Could one of them have contained her work? In 1898, during an excavation near Oxyrhynchus, archaeologists discovered a massive cache of papyri, fragments of plays, letters, and mathematical texts. To this day, many remain untranslated. Some scholars hope that, buried among them, might be a few lines in Hypatia's own hand. But how would we know? She wrote in Greek, like many others. She commented on works shared by dozens of thinkers. Without a signature, without a clear reference, her voice might already be among us, hidden in plain sight. There is also the possibility that her legacy survives not in parchment, but in the geometry of later thinkers. Some mathematical concepts attributed to medieval scholars may have roots in her teachings, distilled and transmitted through generations, their origin forgotten, but their form preserved. So we are left with questions. If Hypatia's writings could be found, what might they reveal? Would they transform our understanding of ancient mathematics? Would they show us a vision of the cosmos untouched by dogma or war? Or would they speak to something deeper, a lost harmony between reason and wonder, between science and the soul. Her absence lingers. In a city once ablaze with knowledge, her name flickers like the last candle in a darkened hall. The silence where her words should be is deafening. And yet, it is in this silence that the mystery breathes. Perhaps her writings were destroyed forever. Or perhaps, somewhere they remain, quiet, waiting for someone to find them, to open a scroll and hear her voice once again. As Alexandria's fading scrolls crumble into dust and Hypatia's voice falls silent in the annals of time, our journey shifts eastward again, into the rugged highlands and windswept valleys of the Armenian plateau. Here, where snow dusts the mountaintops and the stones echo with ancient memory, history was not merely written but carved into rock, sealed in monasteries and, at times, quietly erased. Among the many dynasties, satraps, and vassals that moved through the Armenian highlands, one figure stands curiously absent from the pages of history. A man whose title is known, Tetrarch, but whose fate remains cloaked in silence. Who was the Tetrarch of Armenia? And why did he vanish? The word Tetrarch suggests Roman influence, literally meaning ruler of a quarter, but its usage in the Armenian context is far from clear. Some scholars speculate the title may have referred to a local prince or provincial governor under Roman or Parthian suzerainty, during a time when Armenia sat precariously between two empires. A buffer state, a battleground, and often a pawn in greater imperial games. Armenia, after all, was no stranger to political instability. The Kingdom of Greater Armenia, established in the 2nd century BC, found itself repeatedly torn between the ambitions of Rome to the west and Parthia, and later Sassanid Persia to the east. Its kings were sometimes native, sometimes imposed by foreign powers. Alliances shifted. Thrones were usurped. Families disappeared. But one story, passed down through fragments of Greek, Syriac, and Armenian sources, stands out. Sometime between the late 1st and early 2nd century AD, an era marked by imperial flux and local turmoil, a tetrarch ruling a strategic region in northern Armenia vanished. Not defeated, not exiled, vanished. No declaration of death, no trace of rebellion, no burial site. His name, curiously, is not recorded in surviving Roman annals, perhaps deliberately omitted or perhaps lost to time. In a region saturated with shifting loyalties and contested borders, was his disappearance a matter of political convenience or something deeper? Armenian historians like Movsis Koronatsi, writing centuries later, mention obscure regional lords whose reigns were swallowed by the mountains or dissolved in fire and smoke. Were these poetic metaphors for battle, or coded references to something else entirely? One account speaks of a tetrarch whose court was located near the ancient fortress of Erebuni, modern-day Yerevan. He ruled during a time of fragile peace between Rome and Parthia, collecting tributes and acting as intermediary. Then, one winter, he and his entire entourage, over 40 men, were said to have ridden into the southern mountains and never returned. Some blame a landslide or an ambush by local tribes. Others claim a cave temple collapse tied to Mithraic rites practiced in secret by some nobles in the region. But no ruins, bones, or artifacts were ever definitively linked to this group. Roman sources are strangely quiet. Tacitus, who describes Roman dealings with Armenia in great detail, mentions logistical difficulties in the region, obscure leaders, and sudden power vacuums. Could one of these omissions be this very tetrarch? Another theory suggests he may have defected to Parthia, perhaps lured by promises of autonomy or power. If true, this could explain the Roman silence, and why no tomb was ever built in Armenian soil. Yet Parthian records are equally mute. No dignitary of Roman-Armenian origin appears in their court chronicles during this period. More speculative interpretations point to the involvement of Zoroastrian clergy, or perhaps early Christian groups who were beginning to take root in Armenia. Might the Tetrarch have encountered religious tensions that cost him his life, or led him to adopt a new faith and vanish into obscurity, possibly even under a new name? A local legend, told in villages near Lake Savan, speaks of a prince of the West who sought the gods' wisdom in the mountains and never returned. In some versions, he is turned to stone. In others, he walks still, ageless, guarding a secret sealed beneath the rock. It's tempting to dismiss such stories as folklore, but throughout the region, petroglyphs and inscriptions have been found, some dating back to the same period, depicting mounted figures, astral symbols, and even strange dual-language markings in Greek and Parthian. Could these be linked to a lost noble house? Or were they attempts to encode something hidden, something forbidden? In recent years, archaeologists have uncovered tombs and cave dwellings in the mountainous Tavush province that suggest elite occupation, stone carvings with symbols unfamiliar to the broader Armenian tradition. No names, no known family crests, just silence and craftsmanship. Could this be where the Tetrarch ended his days? In hiding, in exile, or conducting rituals we no longer understand? Or could his disappearance have been orchestrated, silenced by Rome or Parthia for unknown reasons, erased not only from the land, but from memory? The historian's task, as always, is to sift through the smoke and ash of time. But in Armenia, where myth and fact often intertwine like the vines over a ruined monastery, the line between history and legend is difficult to trace. And so we wonder, what happened to the Tetrarch? Was he betrayed by allies, destroyed by nature, or did he walk away willingly, abandoning power for something unseen? Perhaps the mountains still know. Perhaps, buried beneath centuries of dust and silence, his name waits to be rediscovered, chiseled faintly into a cave wall or sealed in a tomb not yet opened. Until then, his story remains a shadow. Another mystery, half whispered by the wind of history, vanished but not forgotten. As we leave behind the misty highlands of Armenia and the silent void left by a vanished Tetrarch, our journey winds east, across deserts, steppes, and the Great Silk Road, to a land where emperors were buried with the heavens above and the earth beneath. We arrive in ancient China, among the foothills of the Hebei province, where a quiet mountain once held a secret buried for over 2,000 years. Mancheng, a name few outside China had ever heard, until 1968. That year, construction workers stumbled upon a hidden chamber deep beneath a hillside. What they found was not merely a tomb, but a revelation. Inside, untouched by time, lay a body encased in glittering green stone. Not gold, not silver. Jade, the jade burial suit of Liu Sheng. Each piece, over 2,000 tiles, meticulously cut, polished, and sewn together with threads of gold, shaped to every contour of the human body, delicate, imposing, haunting. The suit gleamed softly in the dim light, as though the stone itself remembered the royal breath once trapped inside. And in that moment, scholars realized they were standing before something unique in the archaeological record, something both real and otherworldly. Who was Liu Sheng? A prince of the Western Han dynasty, Liu Sheng lived in the 2nd century BC. He ruled over the Zhongshan Kingdom, a semi-autonomous realm within the empire. Known for his indulgent lifestyle and love of Taoist philosophy, Liu Sheng was also deeply concerned with immortality, a preoccupation not uncommon among Chinese elites of the time. But what made his burial so extraordinary wasn't just its splendor. It was the choice of jade. Jade had long been revered in China. not for wealth or decoration, but for its symbolic and supposed spiritual properties. It was said to preserve the body, to prevent decay, to shield the soul. Taoist texts speak of jade as the stone of heaven, a bridge between life and afterlife. But was it ever truly believed to grant immortality? Liu Sheng's tomb suggests maybe. The jade suit, far more than a funerary garment, seems almost like a device, carefully constructed, piece by piece, as if to contain something. Some scholars propose it was meant to trap the spirit, to keep it from wandering, or perhaps even to facilitate its journey to the celestial realm. But if so, why are jade suits so rare? Of the hundreds of Han-era royal tombs unearthed, only a handful have yielded jade suits. And of those, Liu Sheng's is the most complete, the most elaborate, and perhaps the best preserved. Why did some rulers receive them while others did not? Was jade restricted by status, belief, or politics? Or could there have been knowledge, esoteric traditions, shared only among a select few? The suits themselves raise further questions. The craftsmanship is astonishing. Jade is notoriously difficult to carve, yet each tile was shaped with precision, then drilled and threaded by hand. In Liu Sheng's case, gold wire was used. His wife's suit, found in a nearby tomb, used silver. Lower-ranking nobles used silk or hemp. How many years did it take to create these suits? How many artisans? And where did they source so much jade? Jade does not exist in great quantities in northern China. Could it have been transported from the south, or even traded from Central Asia? If so, the suit's mystery expands beyond the tomb, beyond the empire, into the shadows of long-forgotten trade routes and spiritual exchanges. And then, there is the matter of Liu Sheng himself. When his remains were examined, scholars found that his body was extraordinarily well preserved for its age. Coincidence? Or did the jade suit actually slow the decay? Some fringe theorists have gone further. They suggest the suit wasn't just symbolic. They claim it was functional, part of an ancient alchemical experiment, an attempt to preserve life indefinitely. Certain Taoist practices involved the ingestion of powdered jade, mercury, or rare elixirs meant to grant eternal youth. Was Liu Sheng a practitioner of such arts? More daring hypotheses ask, was the jade suit the outer shell of a broader process? An early prototype for preservation, centuries before mummification was understood in the West? Or could it represent a ritual not meant for the dead at all, but for a transformation yet unrecognized by modern scholars? None of these theories have been proven, but none have been fully disproven either. And in the quiet halls of the Hebei Provincial Museum, where Liu Sheng now rests behind glass, the suit continues to invite wonder. It glows softly under museum lighting, silent and unmoving, but in its design, its silence, it speaks of a culture reaching across the veil of mortality, seeking to answer the ultimate question. What lies beyond death? And can it be held at bay? The jade suit is not merely a relic. It is a riddle, a fusion of science, belief, and artistry from a time when the body, soul, and cosmos were seen as deeply intertwined. What else lies beneath China's hillsides? How many more jade suits remain undiscovered? And what might they reveal, not only about death, but about how ancient people dreamed of overcoming it? Perhaps somewhere in the mountains, beneath layers of soil and history, another tomb waits, another suit, another secret. Until then, Liu Sheng's silent green armor watches over the centuries, its mystery intact. As the cool green glow of Liu Sheng's jade suit fades into memory, we journey south, across rivers, forests, and oceans, to the steamy highlands of Java. Here, the mists roll over volcanic slopes and ancient banyan trees reach their roots deep into the earth. It is a land of kings and legends, of temples carved in silence and stories whispered through centuries. And it is here, in the heart of the Dutch East Indies, that another mystery stirs beneath the soil: the disappearance of the royal treasure of Prince Diponegoro. The year was 1830. The Java War had just ended, a bloody and protracted struggle between the colonial Dutch forces and a native Javanese prince who had become more than a rebel. Diponegoro was not just a warrior. He was seen by his followers as a spiritual leader, a symbol of prophecy, a prince guided by divine will. For 5 long years, Diponegoro's guerrilla resistance bled the Dutch military. Forest to forest, village to village, he moved like a phantom, rallying tens of thousands to his cause. But when the war finally ended in betrayal, under the guise of peace negotiations, the prince was arrested and exiled. He never returned to Java, but his legend never left, and neither did the question that has haunted historians, treasure hunters, and nationalist dreamers ever since. What happened to Diponegoro's treasure? According to both Dutch and Javanese sources, Diponegoro had amassed a considerable cache of wealth during his campaign. Part of it came from loyal nobles and Muslim clerics who backed his cause. Part of it was confiscated from Dutch outposts and convoys during raids. Some say it included ceremonial crises, sacred heirlooms, gold coins, and royal regalia passed down through generations of Javanese rulers. Yet when the prince was captured, no treasure was recovered, no chest of gold, no weapon enshrined in jewels, no crown, no tribute, no ledger. Some believe it was buried, hidden deep in the hills of central Java by loyal followers in the days or hours before Diponegoro's arrest. Others suggest it was smuggled to protect it from falling into Dutch hands. A few theories claim it was lost in the chaos, its location forgotten even by those who hid it. But there are stranger whispers. In remote villages, some elders speak of pusaka hilang, lost heirlooms tied not only to royal authority but to spiritual power, objects said to contain mystical energy, tools of prophecy or protection, never meant for foreign hands. Could Diponegoro's treasure have been more than material wealth? Could it have been protected not only by secrecy, but by ritual? Dutch colonial records, while exhaustive in documenting his imprisonment and interrogation, mention nothing conclusive about a missing treasure, but they do note that Diponegoro's personal carriage, lavishly adorned, and certain items from his court were never recovered. Curiously, Dutch accounts from the mid-19th century include reports of European officers purchasing Javanese royal curios in markets, items of exquisite craftsmanship, whose origins were untraceable. Could fragments of Diponegoro's legacy have quietly dispersed across collections in Batavia, Amsterdam, or even private European hands? In 1978, an Indonesian archaeologist claimed to have discovered a possible burial site for part of the treasure in the Gunung Kidul region. The dig yielded ceramics and rusted blades, but no gold, no regalia. Just echoes. Today, Diponegoro's name is sacred in Indonesia. His story is taught in schools, his image appears on currency, and his struggle is remembered as one of the earliest organized resistances to colonial rule in Southeast Asia. And yet, one piece remains missing. The treasure, whether literal or symbolic, lies at the heart of his myth. For some, it is a national relic, proof of dignity in the face of conquest. For others, it is a lost spiritual talisman connected to Javanese traditions of royal power, where rulers are not merely political figures, but keepers of divine balance. And in the markets of Yogyakarta and Surakarta, traders sometimes display old daggers, ornaments, or relics, saying little of their origin. Tourists pass by, collectors bargain. But once in a while someone asks, "Could this be from the time of Diponegoro?" They rarely get a straight answer. What if the treasure is still out there, hidden in a hillside cave, buried beneath a rice terrace, resting inside an old wooden chest sealed shut since the 1830s? What if the treasure never existed at all, but was invented after the fact? A tale grown from memory and longing, a national myth forged in the space between history and hope? Or what if the treasure is not meant to be found? Like a forgotten verse of an old poem, waiting to be uncovered not by shovels, but by understanding. In the steaming jungles of Java, where cicadas hum and banyans creak with age, the air still seems to hold secrets. Stories cling to the trees, footsteps echo on old paths, and somewhere, perhaps just beyond the next ridge, lies a truth buried not only in the earth, but in the soul of a people who remember what was taken. A prince, a rebellion, a vanished treasure. And the question remains, what became of the royal wealth of Diponegoro? And if it were found today, would it be merely gold or something far more powerful? As we leave behind the tropical mists of Java and the vanished treasure of a warrior prince, we travel northward to a colder, quieter land where golden relics once crowned rulers not with mere authority, but with a divine presence. Tucked between the forested valleys and gentle slopes of the Korean peninsula lies a kingdom lost to time, Silla, and with it, a glittering enigma that continues to puzzle historians and archaeologists alike: the disappearance of the Silla gold crowns. The landscape of Gyeongju, the ancient capital of Silla, is serene yet haunting. It is scattered with low, rounded burial mounds, known as tumuli, which rise like gentle waves across the green plains. Beneath these man-made hills lie the tombs of kings, queens, and nobles of a kingdom that lasted nearly a millennium, from 57 BC to 935 AD. And buried in some of these mounds, researchers have uncovered something extraordinary. Ornate golden crowns, breathtaking in their craftsmanship, mysterious in their origin. Tall, tree-like spires shoot upward from delicate golden bands. Tiny gold discs dangle like leaves in the wind. The shapes are symbolic, possibly of life, fertility, or spiritual connection with the heavens. Others feature antler-like prongs, evoking a shamanic connection to nature or the world beyond. The Silla crowns, first unearthed in the 20th century, stand apart from the regal headdresses of neighboring civilizations. They are not influenced by the Tang or Han courts of China, nor do they mirror the militaristic elegance of Japanese regalia. These crowns are unique, unapologetically Silla. Yet they raise an unsettling question. Why have so few of them survived? Of the hundreds of known royal tombs in Gyeongju, only a handful of crowns have ever been recovered. The most famous come from tombs number 155, number 98, and the Cheonmachong, Heavenly Horse Tomb. But these are exceptions in a landscape full of unanswered silence. For a kingdom that ruled over much of the Korean peninsula for nearly 1,000 years, the number of recovered crowns, less than 10, is strikingly low. Were the crowns destroyed, stolen, or never buried at all? Mainstream historians offer a range of explanations. One possibility is looting, an age-old threat to royal tombs. Over centuries, tomb raiders may have plundered many mounds, leaving behind only the less valuable artifacts. But archaeologists note that many of the tumuli still appear intact, undisturbed, at least on the surface. And in some excavations, other valuable items, jewelry, glassware, imported luxuries, were still present, while the crown itself was conspicuously absent. Another theory points to deliberate concealment. Perhaps, fearing political instability or foreign invasion, Silla elites hid the most sacred symbols of their dynasty. It's possible that some crowns were dismantled, melted down, or transported to secret sanctuaries. But if so, where are they now? Could they still lie hidden beneath an unexcavated mound? There are over 200 royal tombs in the Gyeongju Basin alone, many untouched, some unnamed. The earth holds its secrets well. Then come the more speculative ideas. Some suggest the crowns were never truly funerary items, that they served in ceremonies or rites not meant to accompany the dead. That what we've found so far were exceptions, not rules. Could it be that the crowns were reserved for living rituals, and passed down or hidden away, never meant to be buried at all? Others turn to cosmological interpretations. The crowns, with their tree-like spires and skyward prongs, may have symbolized the shaman king's connection to divine realms. Were they considered too sacred to be confined to the ground? Could some have been ritually destroyed, returning gold to the earth or sea in symbolic acts of renewal? There are whispers, too, of foreign collectors, Western archaeologists in the 19th and early 20th centuries, operating before modern laws protected Korea's heritage. Might some of the missing crowns lie quietly in European vaults or private collections, misattributed or forgotten? And what of the mythical crown of King Dunhuang, one of Scylla's most celebrated rulers? Said to be forged from the gold of a meteorite, adorned with jade and phoenix feathers. There is no physical evidence that it ever existed. Yet records from later dynasties mention a crown of heaven once worn in the capital. Legend, exaggeration, or a crown that truly vanished with the king? The mystery deepens when we consider that Scylla itself embraced Buddhism in its later centuries, a faith that often emphasized renunciation of worldly wealth. Could this spiritual shift have influenced what was preserved and what was hidden? Might gold crowns, once seen as sacred, have become relics of a past best left buried or forgotten? Today, a few of the recovered crowns reside in the National Museum of Korea in Seoul, displayed in dimly lit halls under protective glass. Tourists gaze at them in awe, reading plaques that offer theories, but no certainty. Scholars debate their meaning. Artists marvel at their design. And beneath the ground of Gyeongju, dozens, perhaps hundreds, of tombs remain unopened. What lies within them? Will more crowns one day be found, tucked beneath stone chambers, wrapped in silk, waiting to be discovered? Or have they been lost forever, hidden by time, greed, or reverence? In the quiet hills of Korea, the mounds do not speak, but they endure, like sealed pages in a book not yet read. And the crowns, those golden halos of kings long forgotten, remain one of the most alluring puzzles of East Asia's ancient past. A mystery wrapped in silk, buried in earth, and shrouded in silence. Where are the missing crowns of Scylla? And if they are ever found, what might they tell us about the power, the spirit, and the secrets of a kingdom lost? From the serene mounds of ancient Gyeongju, where silent crowns of gold whisper forgotten dynastic truths, we shift to a place of louder echoes. Stone pyramids, ceremonial fires, and blood-stained altars. We move across oceans and centuries to the heart of Mesoamerica, where another ruler vanished not only from power, but from the very earth itself. Here, in what is now Mexico City, the remains of Tenochtitlan sleep beneath the concrete veins of a modern metropolis. But once, this city was the radiant capital of the Aztec Empire, its causeways shimmering above Lake Texcoco, its great Templo Mayor rising like a stairway to the gods. And at the height of its glory stood a man whose name still stirs fascination and debate, Montezuma II. He was the 9th Huey Tlatoani, great speaker of the Mexica people. Revered by some as a philosopher king, by others as a tyrant, a ruler caught in the crosswinds of a collapsing world, and yet, despite the libraries of stories told about his final days, one question remains stubbornly unanswered. Where is the body of Montezuma? It is a mystery that confounds both logic and legacy. When Hernán Cortés and his Spanish forces arrived in 1519, Montezuma welcomed them cautiously. Some say as gods, others say as feared guests. He offered gifts of gold, quarters within the palace, and words shaped with ceremonial diplomacy. But what followed was not mutual respect. It was siege, rebellion, betrayal, and eventually, death. What we know, or think we know, is conflicting. Spanish accounts tell us Montezuma died after being struck by stones hurled by his own people during a public address. Weakened, perhaps, by imprisonment and shame, the once mighty emperor was said to have been rejected by the very crowd he had ruled. Others, including indigenous sources, offer a darker version, that the Spaniards killed him in frustration or panic, stabbing or suffocating him to silence the symbol of an empire they could not yet fully control. But regardless of how he died, what happened to his body? One version claims the Aztecs retrieved it amid the chaos, cremating it in accordance with sacred rites. His ashes, perhaps, scattered to the lake, or buried in secret near the temples that defined his rule. Another suggests that the Spaniards took the body and disposed of it unceremoniously, tossed into water or fire, erased as both man and memory in the hope of severing the will of the resistance. Still others, more speculative, wonder if Montezuma was never buried at all. That perhaps, fearing desecration or politicized spectacle, his loyalists spirited away his remains under cover of darkness, hiding them in a cave, temple, or lake island, somewhere sacred, somewhere invisible. Archaeologists have searched, but no tomb has ever been confirmed. In 2007, a team excavating under Mexico City thought they might have found clues to elite Aztec burials: stone boxes, fragments of offerings, ritual layers. But nothing conclusively tied to Montezuma has emerged. Not a bone, not a tooth, not even a funerary emblem inscribed with his name. Could his remains lie beneath modern streets, paved over by the centuries? Could the colonial city of New Spain, built almost overnight upon the raised stones of Tenochtitlan, have swallowed his final resting place? Then there are the myths. Some oral traditions from rural regions whisper of Montezuma's body being hidden far from the city, carried to the mountains by those who loved him, beyond the reach of Spanish conquest. Others speak of a hidden mausoleum buried beneath the waters of the lake itself, now drained and paved, its ancient islands long gone, but all lack evidence. All are shadows. For the Aztecs, death was not the end, but a transformation. Warriors killed in battle or on the sacrificial stone were said to join the sun's journey through the heavens. Rulers, especially those believed semi-divine, were destined to merge with forces beyond the mortal world. Could Montezuma's body have been treated as a sacred vessel, dismantled ritually to release his spirit? Or could his remains have been destroyed deliberately, in an attempt to sever that spiritual power? There's an eerie silence in the sources. The Spaniards, so quick to document their conquests, say little of a funeral. No procession, no marker, no grave. No monument was ever erected. In fact, after his death, Montezuma's name itself became a taboo in some colonial circles. Too potent, too dangerous, too recent to mention. And perhaps that silence was intentional. Did the Aztecs erase him in anger? Was he seen as a traitor who welcomed the invader, a god-king who failed the gods? Or was he too sacred to be discussed by those not initiated in his mysteries? In the centuries since, Montezuma has become many things: a villain, a victim, a visionary. He has been painted by European artists as a decadent ruler crushed by fate, and reclaimed by modern Mexican voices as a tragic figure, caught between empires, between worlds. But his body remains lost. No mausoleum, no tomb, no bones to test, no DNA to compare. Just legends, echoes, and ruins. So we ask, In a city where history is buried under every stone, every foundation, every floorboard, is Montezuma still there, waiting beneath? Or is his absence more powerful than any grave? Does the missing body of Montezuma II represent just a physical puzzle? Or is it a metaphor for everything we still do not understand about conquest, resistance, and the rewriting of memory? And if it were ever found, what truths would it reveal? Or what new questions would it raise? From the highlands of Mesoamerica, where emperors vanished and empires were buried beneath the city's foundations, we now journey across continents and centuries, to the wind-swept plains and fog-laced forests of ancient Britannia. Here, beneath layers of peat and time, another royal figure vanished. Not an emperor, but a queen. A warrior. A symbol of rebellion whose death, like her legacy, remains shrouded in silence and uncertainty. Her name was Boudica. The sky above East Anglia turns slate gray in winter, its low clouds stretching across the horizon like ash from a long extinguished fire. Here, where the heather grows wild and rivers still cut the land in slow serpentine movements, the story of Boudica begins and ends. Somewhere. We just don't know where. Boudica was queen of the Iceni, a Celtic tribe occupying a fertile corner of what is now eastern England. She lived in the shadow of the Roman occupation, a foreign rule imposed not by diplomacy, but by military conquest and calculated control. Her husband, Prasutagus, was a Roman client king. Upon his death, around 60 AD, he left his kingdom jointly to his daughters and to Rome, perhaps hoping to secure peace through compromise. But Rome wanted it all. Roman officials ignored the will. They annexed the territory, seized noble lands, and, according to the Roman historian Tacitus, flogged Boudica and assaulted her daughters. And so began the revolt. What followed was one of the bloodiest uprisings in Roman Britain. Under Boudica's command, the Iceni allied with neighboring tribes and unleashed a wave of fury that shook the Roman Empire. 3 Roman cities, Camulodunum, modern-day Colchester, Londinium, London, and Verulamium, St. Albans, were burned to the ground. Temples, forums, and villas were reduced to rubble. Roman citizens were slaughtered without mercy. In Roman accounts, tens of thousands perished. Boudica rode at the head of her army in a war chariot, her daughters at her side. She is described as tall, with wild red hair falling to her waist, eyes that pierced like spears, and a voice like thunder. Whether these descriptions are literal or mythologized, the impact she left was real. And then, the rebellion collapsed. Roman governor Gaius Suetonius Paulinus regrouped his legions and met the rebel army in a location still debated by historians, possibly along the Roman road of Watling Street. Despite being outnumbered, Roman discipline and formation proved superior. The Britons were routed. The rebellion was crushed. And Boudica? Tacitus, writing decades later, gives 2 conflicting endings. In one, she poisons herself to avoid capture. In another, she dies of illness, perhaps despair, perhaps a wound. Cassius Dio, writing in the 3rd century, simply claims she fell ill and was buried with honor by her people. But where? No grave has been found. No tomb, no barrow, no ceremonial site marked with her name or symbol. For a woman so iconic, her disappearance from the archaeological record is striking. So where is Boudica's final resting place? One theory points toward the outskirts of London, beneath a modern railway station. For decades, a persistent urban legend has claimed that Boudica's remains lie beneath Platform 8 at King's Cross Station, a story popularized by Victorian writers and later woven into pop culture, even Harry Potter lore. But there is no evidence, no excavation to support this romantic tale. Others suggest her grave lies somewhere in the East Anglian countryside. hidden in a royal mound now indistinguishable from the land around it. Could she have been buried near the ancient Iceni capital, close to modern-day Norfolk? Or was she cremated, her ashes scattered by her followers, deliberately leaving no trace for the Romans to desecrate? Some believe she was buried in secret as an act of cultural defiance, a way of keeping her memory sacred and safe from imperial erasure. Others wonder if her people wanted her to become part of the land itself. In many Celtic traditions, death was not an end, but a return to earth, to forest, to spirit. The absence of her grave leaves room for more speculative ideas. Did her body fall into Roman hands and disappear in a quiet, undocumented execution? Or was she never recovered at all, killed in battle and left among the nameless dead? Could her remains be sitting in a museum drawer, unrecognized, a bone fragment from a female of high status with no name attached? Or perhaps the mystery lies not in the ground, but in how history chooses to remember or forget. Boudica's story was revived in Roman texts to serve imperial caution, a tale of rebellion crushed by discipline. In the 19th century, she was reimagined as a British heroine, cast in bronze on the Thames embankment near Parliament, riding her chariot in eternal defiance. Her name has been evoked in wars, in nationalist rhetoric, even feminist movements. She has become more symbol than person. And yet, despite all this, despite statues, stories, and school books, the woman herself remains missing. No confirmed burial, no remains, no personal artifacts, just the wind across the heath and the occasional discovery of charred Roman tiles beneath British soil. So we are left to wonder, is Boudica's grave hidden beneath centuries of silence? Or has her story become her true legacy, written not in stone but in the unresolved questions that still echo through the mists of Britain? And if one day her remains were found, beneath a hill, in a crypt, or under the rails of a London train, what would we learn? Would it change how we see her? Or would the mystery, as always, continue to outlast the facts? As the winds of Britannia fade behind us, we move now through time and across the Atlantic, to the emerald heart of Central America. Here, where dense rainforests cloak the land in endless green, sunlight barely reaches the jungle floor. The air is thick with mist and memory. And in these shadowed canopies lies a story whispered for centuries. A city of gleaming stone, a kingdom lost to vines and silence. They call it La Ciudad Blanca, the White City of Honduras. The legend begins in the Mosquitia region, one of the last truly unexplored frontiers on Earth. Stretching across eastern Honduras and into Nicaragua, this wild expanse of rainforest, mountains, and rivers is so dense, so remote, that even modern satellites struggle to pierce its canopy. For generations, local indigenous communities, like the Pek and the Tawaka, have spoken of a hidden city deep within the jungle, a place of white stone buildings and grand plazas, untouched for centuries. Some say it was abandoned overnight. Others claim its inhabitants were cursed, swallowed by the very forest that once sustained them. Still others call it the City of the Monkey God, a name popularized by explorers and adventurers. But is it myth or memory? The first European mentions of the White City date back to the 16th century. Hernán Cortés himself, the Spanish conquistador who brought down the Aztec Empire, wrote in 1526 of rumors among indigenous allies, tales of a wealthy city hidden inland, filled with riches greater than any he had seen. He never found it. Centuries passed, and yet the stories endured. In the 1930s, the American explorer Theodore Mord claimed to have found the fabled city. Funded by the Museum of the American Indian, Mord ventured deep into the Mosquitia with a local guide. He returned with thousands of artifacts, jade, stone tools, and carved figures, saying he had reached the outskirts of a sacred site. but he never revealed the location, citing fears of looting. Months later, Morde died under mysterious circumstances. The truth of what he found was buried with him. So what was he protecting? A real city? Or a tale crafted for fame? Decades later, in the early 21st century, technology caught up to legend. In 2012, a team of researchers used LiDAR, light detection and ranging, to scan the Mesquitia canopy from the air. What they found stunned the archaeological world. Beneath the jungle's leafy roof were unmistakable signs of human construction. Plazas, pyramids, canals, and terracing, structures invisible to the naked eye, yet precisely aligned. A civilization had once flourished here. Not just a city, but a network of them. Evidence pointed to a sophisticated society that had shaped the landscape, perhaps thriving between 500 and 1500 AD. But who were these people? The region lies at the crossroads of the Maya to the north and the lesser-known civilizations of the Istmo-Columbian area to the south. Yet the structures revealed by LiDAR don't fit neatly into either world. The artifacts unearthed, stone ceremonial seats, monkey-like effigies, finely carved sculptures, hint at a distinct culture, one that left no written language, no surviving descendants claiming their legacy. A ghost civilization. Archaeologists tread cautiously. Some suggest the White City was not one place, but a mythologized memory of many now buried cities. Others believe it may have been a pilgrimage site, sacred but never permanent. Still others argue that stories of its sudden abandonment may link to climate shifts, disease, or social collapse, similar to what befell other Mesoamerican centers. And yet, certain details linger, stubborn and strange. Why do local legends speak of gods with animal faces, especially the monkey, revered and feared? Why did early explorers return with artifacts seemingly unrelated to nearby cultures? And why do so many expeditions end in failure or tragedy? In 2015, an on-the-ground expedition led by archaeologist Christopher Fisher ventured to one of the newly detected sites. What they found was astonishing. Untouched ruins, stone ceremonial thrones, and offerings left as if in ritual farewell. But the team also encountered something else. Within weeks of their return, many members were struck by a rare flesh-eating parasitic disease, leishmaniasis. It was a grim reminder of how dangerous, even cursed, the jungle can be. Was this merely a tragic coincidence, or a modern echo of ancient warnings? Some fringe theorists go further. They suggest extraterrestrial contact, or Atlantean survivors, or energy vortexes hidden in the landscape. These stories often borrow from colonial tropes, projecting fantasy onto cultures whose true histories were never recorded by those who destroyed them. Still, their persistence speaks to something deeper, a human hunger for lost worlds, for secrets just beyond our reach. Could the White City still be waiting, untouched and sacred? Or has it already been found, its identity still unclear, obscured not by vines, but by our own assumptions? Even now, new expeditions are being planned. LiDAR continues to reveal shapes in the canopy, lines too straight, clusters too organized to be nature alone. Perhaps the White City isn't a city at all, but a metaphor, representing a civilization swallowed not just by time, but by neglect. And so the jungle keeps its silence. The rain falls softly on buried stones, roots curl around ancient walls, and somewhere in the shadowed interior of Honduras, the truth lies dormant, half seen, half believed. What would it mean to find it fully? To uncover a city of white stone deep in a land that still resists maps and machines? Would it rewrite history or simply remind us how much we still don't know? From the cryptic verses of the Sibylline books, lost among ashes and time, we now ascend to a colder, starker land, where mountains claw at the sky and deep lakes reflect the silence of a forgotten world. Here, on the rugged eastern edges of Anatolia, lies the highland cradle of an ancient kingdom. A realm once powerful, feared and admired, a kingdom now almost entirely forgotten. This is the land of Urartu. Nestled between the Anatolian Plateau and the Caucasus Mountains, with Lake Van shimmering at its heart, Urartu flourished in the first millennium BC. Its mighty fortresses, some carved directly into the volcanic stone of mountainsides, still rise today as jagged silhouettes against the clouds. Cyclopean walls, precisely cut, interlock like puzzles. Canals stretch across miles of barren ground, silent testaments to engineering as advanced as it is mysterious. And yet, by the 6th century BC, Urartu was gone. No grand collapse recorded. No climactic battle described. No chronicled conquest or devastating plague. The kingdom that had stood as a rival to Assyria for centuries simply disappeared. Who were these people? And what became of them? Urartu first emerges in the historical record around the 9th century BC, when Assyrian kings began to clash with a new power rising in the mountainous north. The Urartians were formidable. Their rulers, kings like Menua, Argishti, and Sarduri, constructed massive citadels and left inscriptions in a distinct language, related distantly to Hurrian and unlike anything spoken today. Their capital, Tushpa, overlooked Lake Van and was fortified with such precision that parts of it remain standing after nearly 3,000 years. The Urartians worshipped a pantheon of deities, chief among them Haldi, the god of war and the sky. Their temples, fortresses, and irrigation systems hint at a centralized, sophisticated state with military, religious, and technological prowess. They had metallurgy, a script, and a complex bureaucracy. But then, silence. By the early 6th century BC, Urartu fades from history. Its inscriptions stop. Its cities are abandoned or repurposed by others. And in its place, a new people, the Armenians, appear in the region, though their early records do not mention conquest or direct continuity. Mainstream historians offer several explanations. One theory holds that the Medes, an Iranian people expanding westward, may have attacked Urartian strongholds, weakening the kingdom beyond repair. But the Medes themselves left little written record, and no clear account of Urartu's fall survives. Others suggest internal decline, succession crises, drought, or economic collapse. Yet no decisive evidence has been found. No burned palaces, no mass graves, no conclusive end. The mystery is made more puzzling by how rapidly the memory of Urartu was erased. Unlike Assyria or Babylon, whose legacies were carried forward by successive empires, Urartu left few inheritors. Even the name Urartu comes from foreign records, Assyrian inscriptions, Greek translations. What the people called themselves remains uncertain. Were they the Biainili, as some inscriptions suggest, or did they have another name entirely, now lost? Some archaeologists believe the Urartians weren't wiped out, but absorbed, that their language, traditions, and even bloodlines were folded into the growing Armenian identity that took root in the region. Indeed, some scholars argue that elements of Urartian fortification and religious architecture influenced early Armenian culture. But, if so, why the silence? Why did no Armenian epic or early chronicle preserve the memory of this great kingdom? Others look beyond the mainstream. There are fringe theories that suggest Urartu may have been far more advanced than previously believed, possessing astronomical knowledge or metallurgical skills passed down from older prehistoric civilizations. Some note the precision of stonework in Urartian fortresses, likening them to structures in South America or Egypt, hinting, without proof, at lost technologies or global links. Still others invoke the possibility that Urartu's disappearance coincided with changes in climate, seismic events, or migrations triggered by forces yet to be understood. Was their infrastructure too reliant on complex irrigation that collapsed with a shift in rainfall? Could earthquakes in the volatile Anatolian highlands have triggered a slow exodus rather than a dramatic fall? Yet even these explanations feel incomplete. One cannot stand atop the weathered stones of Erebuni, an Urartian fortress near modern-day Yerevan, and not feel the weight of something unresolved. The foundations are there, the carved inscriptions, faded but visible, the staircases leading nowhere. It all suggests continuity interrupted. So where did the rulers go? Where are their tombs? Why do their gods go unmentioned by those who came after? Perhaps the greatest mystery is not that Urartu vanished, but how thoroughly it was forgotten. Inscriptions etched in an ancient tongue, cities swallowed by earth, a people whose name, whose voice, and whose story dissolved into the mists of time. And yet, their stones remain, defiant, enduring. Could more traces lie buried beneath the highland soil? In remote valleys, unexcavated sites, or crumbling archives forgotten in distant museums? And if we find them, will they speak of a quiet end, a violent collapse, or a transformation too subtle for chronicles and conquest to capture? The kingdom of Urartu may be gone, but its shadow lingers in the mountain air, its silence still loud with questions. From the windswept fortresses of Urartu in the Anatolian highlands, we now journey across oceans and millennia to a different kind of monument, one hidden not in stone or script, but in earth and silence. In the northeastern corner of present-day Louisiana, surrounded by bayous, swamps, and quiet fields, lies a place that defies expectation. At first glance, it seems almost ordinary. Green ridges of grass rising in concentric arcs, a massive earthen mound dominating the horizon, and winding waterways threading through a flat, humid landscape. But these are no natural formations. This is Poverty Point, one of the most astonishing and least understood archaeological sites in North America. Built nearly 3,500 years ago, around 1700 BC, by a culture with no known writing system, no metal tools, and no domesticated animals, Poverty Point remains a mystery that continues to baffle historians and archaeologists alike. Who built this massive earthwork complex? How did they organize such labor, such vision, and why, after centuries of activity, did they suddenly disappear? At its peak, Poverty Point was a sprawling settlement covering over 900 acres. Its most iconic feature is a set of 6 semi-elliptical ridges that curve around a central plaza. These ridges, once standing several feet tall, appear to have supported homes and structures. They were engineered with precision, carefully leveled, aligned, and connected. Near the edge of the complex stands Mound A, also known as the Bird Mound for its possible avian shape. Over 70 feet tall and 700 feet across, it was constructed in an astonishingly short period of time, perhaps as little as 90 days, using baskets of earth carried one by human hands. It remains one of the largest earthen mounds in the Western Hemisphere. But perhaps the most intriguing aspect of Poverty Point is what isn't there. No stone buildings, no known burials, no clear hierarchies or palaces, no carvings of kings or warriors, no evidence of warfare, and no written language to tell us why it was built, who ruled it, if anyone did, or what belief system guided its creators. Artifacts discovered at the site add even more questions. Thousands of stone objects, arrowheads, figurines, beads, and cooking balls have been unearthed, many made of materials sourced from hundreds of miles away. Flint from the Ohio River Valley, soapstone from the Appalachians, copper from the Great Lakes. How did these materials travel such vast distances? Was Poverty Point a major trade hub? Perhaps the center of a vast network of prehistoric exchange? Or was it more than that? Perhaps a ceremonial center, a spiritual gathering place for a culture whose sacred rites left no written record. Despite the enormous effort required to construct Poverty Point, there is little evidence of a class system or coercive leadership. There are no signs of kings or dynasties, no elite tombs or hordes of wealth. This has led some scholars to suggest that the builders were part of an egalitarian society, organized by consensus rather than command. But how, then, did they coordinate such monumental projects? And perhaps, most compelling, why did they stop? By around 1100 BC, the site was mysteriously abandoned. No signs of destruction, no signs of invasion or environmental collapse, just silence. A gradual fading from activity. The culture that built it disappears from the archaeological record, replaced by new groups with different styles, different tools, and different patterns of settlement. Did they migrate? Were they absorbed by other cultures? Did a religious or social transformation cause them to abandon their sacred center? Some have proposed environmental explanations. The Mississippi River and its tributaries, ever shifting and prone to flood, may have altered trade routes or made the site unsustainable. Others suggest disease, crop failure, or internal socio-political changes that left Poverty Point obsolete. But no definitive answer has emerged. Fringe theories abound, as they often do when mainstream narratives fall short. Some point to the symbolic layout of the mounds, noting potential solar and celestial alignments. Was the site used as an ancient observatory? A calendar aligned to solstices or equinoxes? A ritual space tied to the stars? Others, more speculative still, link Poverty Point to myths of a lost ancient civilization, one that may have risen and fallen long before the more well-known Mississippian cultures that came centuries later. With its lack of cultural continuity, some even wonder if the knowledge and skills required to build Poverty Point arrived with an already vanishing group, outsiders perhaps, whose homeland had been left behind, whose story was never recorded. Yet amidst the theories, the mystery endures. Today, the grass-covered ridges of Poverty Point sit quietly under the southern sun. Birdsong and the rustle of wind in the trees replace the bustle of ancient life. Tourists walk its paths with awe but little certainty. The soil holds its secrets close. Why did a people with no metal, no beasts of burden, and no known writing build one of the largest earthworks in prehistoric America? What stories did they tell, sitting around fires on the earthen ridges? What gods, or ancestors, did they honor from the heights of Mound A? And why, after generations of thriving culture, did they walk away? No tablets, no scrolls, no carvings remain. Only the earth and the silence. Perhaps one day, a new discovery will shed light on these ancient architects. Until then, the builders of Poverty Point remain just out of reach, half-glimpsed figures at the edge of history, waiting to be remembered. From the silent ridges of Poverty Point, shaped by a culture we still struggle to name, we now turn to one of history's most infamous figures, a man whose name has echoed for nearly 2,000 years in scandal, rumor, and fire. But unlike the monuments of ancient America, which stand tall though silent, the final resting place of this Roman emperor remains conspicuously absent, hidden, missing, or perhaps deliberately erased. This is the mystery of the lost tomb of Nero. Today, modern Rome bustles over layers of antiquity. Temples repurposed into churches, streets laid atop ancient forums, and time-worn marble buried beneath asphalt. But in certain quiet corners, fragments of an older, darker Rome remain. Along the banks of the Tiber, on the edge of the Pincian Hill, shadows stretch across a park that once held sprawling gardens, marble halls, and golden domes. It was here, according to some traditions, that Emperor Nero met his end in 68 AD, alone, exiled, and hunted. But despite the notoriety of his reign, the precise location of Nero's burial chamber has never been found. How could the tomb of such a prominent figure vanish without a trace? Born Lucius Domitius Ahenobarbus, Nero rose to power as a teenager, the last ruler of the Julio-Claudian dynasty. His rule was marked by extravagance, paranoia, and violence. He's remembered, perhaps unfairly, for playing the liar while Rome burned, for orchestrating deadly conspiracies, and for ruthless executions, including those of his own mother and wife. Yet he was also a patron of the arts, a populist who sought the favor of the masses, and a man consumed by the desire to reshape Rome into a city worthy of his grandeur. His Domus Aurea, the Golden House, was unlike anything the empire had seen. A palace of rotating ceilings, artificial lakes, and gilded walls that shocked even the elite. When rebellion swept across the empire and the Senate declared him a public enemy, Nero fled. Cornered in a suburban villa, he took his own life, or as some later stories claim, was helped to do so by a trusted servant. His final words, according to legend, "What an artist dies in me." He was only 30 years old. And then silence. We know that he was buried. Suetonius, the Roman historian, records that his former nurses and concubines secretly recovered his body and laid it to rest in the family tomb of the Domitii Ahenobarbi, located near the Pincian Hill. But no tomb attributed to Nero has ever been uncovered. No epitaph, no sarcophagus, no mausoleum bearing his name. Why? In the decades that followed Nero's death, Rome underwent a transformation. His successors, beginning with the Flavian dynasty, condemned his memory, a practice known as damnatio memoriae. Statues were torn down, inscriptions chiseled away. His grand palace was stripped and buried beneath new constructions, including the baths of Trajan. The empire wanted to forget, but some people didn't. Surprisingly, Nero's reputation did not remain uniformly negative. In the eastern provinces of the empire, rumors persisted that Nero had not died at all. Several impostors claimed to be the emperor returned, and they gathered significant followings. Coins were minted with his image years after his death. Even in Rome, Nero's grave, if it existed, was said to attract flowers and offerings for generations. Pilgrims came to pay tribute, quietly defying official memory. Could the location of his tomb have been deliberately concealed to prevent it from becoming a site of political unrest? Could it have been desecrated or destroyed to ensure his legacy remained one of disgrace? Or could it still be hidden beneath the very foundations of modern Rome, awaiting rediscovery? Some historians have looked toward the Villa Borghese area, where the ancient family tomb of the Domitii is believed to have once stood. Excavations there have been limited, constrained by modern development. A few Roman inscriptions referencing the Domitii have been found in the vicinity, but nothing definitive. Others suggest the burial might lie under the gardens near the Aurelian walls, long overgrown and unexplored. There is also a curious link to a site long considered sacred in another tradition entirely. In the early centuries of Christianity, believers built shrines over the graves of saints and martyrs. One of the most prominent was St. Peter's Basilica, constructed on what was believed to be the burial place of the apostle. But some researchers have speculated, without hard evidence, that the Vatican site may have once overlapped with the Domitii grounds. Could Nero's burial have been quietly replaced, overbuilt, and forgotten in the rush of religious transformation? Still, others entertain more fringe ideas. Some theorize that Nero's body was never recovered, that the story of his burial was fabricated to bring closure to a scandalous chapter in Roman history. Others suggest his tomb was hidden deliberately by loyalists, creating the foundation for the Nero redivivus myth, a belief that he would one day return in glory. There are even stories, passed down through obscure texts, that Nero's body was moved far from Rome, buried in secret in the eastern provinces where support for him lingered long after his official condemnation. But for all the speculation, one fact remains. We have never found his tomb. And unlike other emperors, Augustus, Hadrian, even Caligula, Nero has no memorial in the modern city. No shrine, no museum, only his name, echoing through history with the weight of both infamy and fascination. Is it possible that beneath layers of stone and centuries of history, the burial chamber of Rome's most controversial emperor still lies intact? Could it hold not just bones and ashes, but lost artifacts, personal effects, documents, art, capable of reshaping what we think we know about Nero? Or is it gone forever, destroyed by those who feared that even in death, Nero's presence might stir the people once more? In the depths of Rome, beneath parks and palazzos, the answer may still be waiting, hidden, silent, watching the centuries pass. From the shadowed depths of imperial Rome and the elusive grave of Nero, we now cross continents, to a land shaped by desert winds and the whisper of the Pacific tide. Northern Peru, a place where the bones of ancient civilizations lie beneath shifting sands, preserved by time and silence. And in one of these forgotten tombs, sealed for over 1,500 years, archaeologists made a discovery that continues to puzzle the modern world. She is known as the Lady of Kau, and her story, what we know of it, has rewritten history, while raising even more questions. The site is El Brujo, an archaeological complex situated on a low bluff overlooking the coastal plains of the Chicama Valley. To the west, the ocean churns in the distance. To the east, the Andes rise like a broken spine. Here, the Moche people flourished between 100 and 700 AD, master artisans, skilled engineers, and enigmatic spiritualists whose beliefs still remain largely opaque. In 2005, while excavating one of the site's ancient pyramidal platforms, a team led by archaeologist Regulo Franco uncovered an ornately decorated burial chamber. Inside, wrapped in fine textiles and adorned with gold, copper, and semi-precious stones, lay the well-preserved tattooed remains of a woman. Not a queen, not a priestess, but possibly both. The Lady of Kau was buried with extraordinary care, alongside weapons, ceremonial items, and lavish adornments usually reserved for male rulers. Her body, mummified by the dry desert air, bore tattoos unlike any seen before. Snakes, spiders, and geometric motifs etched in indigo ink across her arms, hands, and legs. Her teeth had been ritually altered. Her presence in the tomb was powerful, commanding, undeniable. And yet, no one knew her name. Who was this woman? What role did she play in Moche society? And why was she interred in a way that defied nearly every assumption scholars had made about gender and leadership in ancient Peru? Until this discovery, most researchers believed the Moche elite was patriarchal, ruled by warrior kings and male priest rulers whose power was etched in pottery and carved on temple walls. The elaborate murals at nearby Huaca de la Luna depict scenes of combat, sacrifice, and pageantry, almost always centered on men. But the Lady of Kau challenges that view. Could she have been a high priestess, channeling divine energy through ritual and bloodletting? A queen in her own right? Or something more? Something that doesn't fit neatly into our modern categories of politics, religion, and gender? Mainstream archaeological interpretations suggest that she held extraordinary religious authority, perhaps serving as a spiritual leader or oracle. The presence of ceremonial clubs and spears in her tomb hints at military power as well. Some speculate that she might have ruled a region of the Moche world, exercising both secular and sacred control. Yet others point to something even more enigmatic: her tattoos. They were not decorative, not random. They carried meaning, symbols tied to fertility, death, transformation. The spider, for instance, in Moche cosmology, is linked to the underworld and blood rituals. The snake is a messenger, a guardian, a shapeshifter between worlds. These markings may have been more than status. They could have been tools, talismans of shamanic power. But how did she rise to such prominence in a society thought to be rigidly male-dominated? Some scholars suggest the Moche world was more fluid than previously believed, capable of elevating women to positions of authority when conditions demanded it. Droughts, wars, plagues, times when traditional hierarchies collapsed, and those with visionary or spiritual insight emerged as leaders. Was the Lady of Kau one such figure? Others question whether the Moche were ever as patriarchal as assumed. After all, much of what we know comes from their iconography. Images that may have symbolized myth rather than literal history. Could there have been a hidden tradition of female leadership all along, obscured by time, erosion, and scholarly bias? And then, there are the more speculative theories. Some propose that the Lady of Kau was a being of divine lineage, believed by her people to be descended from gods or spirits. That her body was prepared not just for remembrance, but for veneration, a living deity made mortal. Others, more fringe in nature, point to her altered teeth and cranial structure as evidence of ritual transformation, attempts to physically mark her as separate, as chosen. A few even connect her tattoos and symbols to other ancient cultures across the Pacific, raising unproven but intriguing questions of contact and cultural exchange. Could her power have come from distant lands? From lost rituals? From a lineage we no longer recognize? And why, after such careful burial, did her memory fade? There are no texts, no stelae bearing her name, no oral tradition that survived into modern times. She vanished into the sands, and only by chance, by excavation, was her legacy uncovered. Today, her remains are preserved in a museum near El Brujo, watched over by curators and scholars who continue to study her clothing, her adornments, and the pigments of her tattoos. She remains silent, yet evocative, offering no direct answers, only the gravity of her presence. What would she say if she could speak? Was she revered or feared? Did her people follow her with devotion? Or did her power isolate her in life as it has in death? The Lady of Kau forces us to reconsider not just Moche society, but the very way we approach the past. She reminds us that history is not always written. It is buried, waiting for us to look deeper, to listen more carefully. And so we are left with questions. Is she the only one? Were there others like her, hidden, unexcavated, unnamed? And perhaps most haunting of all, what part of her story still lies beneath the sand, untouched, waiting for someone to return and find her again? From the windswept tombs of ancient Peru and the tattooed silence of the Lady of Kau, we cross to another land of shadows and marble. A land where funerary art speaks more than inscriptions, and where the voices of a vanished people echo in a language no one alive can fully understand. This is central Italy, and this is the enigma of the Etruscans. Long before Rome's legions marched across continents, before Caesar's name filled scrolls and monuments, another civilization flourished across the hills of Tuscany and Lazio. They built great cities like Veii, Tarquinia, and Cerveteri. Their tombs were painted with vivid murals of banquets and dancing figures. Their temples rose on stone platforms, Their artisans worked gold with astonishing precision, and yet, despite their influence, their wealth, and their sophistication, one essential thread remains lost: their voice. The Etruscan language is one of the most puzzling mysteries of the ancient Mediterranean. At first glance, the mystery seems manageable. After all, Etruscan inscriptions have survived. We can read the letters, an adapted form of the Greek alphabet. We know how the words are pronounced. Short funerary epitaphs, religious dedications, and even legal texts have been found carved into stone, written on pottery, and etched in metal. But knowing how to read a word is not the same as knowing what it means. Because Etruscan is a linguistic orphan, a language that does not belong to the Indo-European family that includes Latin, Greek, Sanskrit, and nearly every other ancient tongue of Europe and Asia. Its grammar is alien, its vocabulary largely undeciphered. The few words we understand, clan, meaning son, avils, meaning years, come from repetitive patterns in funerary texts. And this leads to the haunting question: where did the Etruscans come from? Classical writers had their own theories. Herodotus, writing in the 5th century BC, claimed that the Etruscans were migrants from Lydia in Asia Minor, who fled famine and crossed the sea to settle in Italy. Dionysius of Halicarnassus, on the other hand, argued they were native to Italy, autochthonous, arising from the land itself. Modern scholarship has wrestled with the same debate. Some archaeologists point to continuity in the material culture of the Italian Bronze Age, suggesting that the Etruscans were indeed a local development, descendants of earlier Villanovan cultures. Others note peculiarities in burial customs, artistic motifs, and language that seem to hint at Eastern influences. In the mid-20th century, a tantalizing artifact surfaced: the Lemnos stele. Found on the Greek island of Lemnos, it bore an inscription written in a language strikingly similar to Etruscan, though dated to the 6th century BC. The resemblance raised bold questions. Was there once a wider family of non-Indo-European languages in the Aegean and Italy? Had the Etruscans truly come from across the sea? Then there is the Pyrgi tablets, 3 thin sheets of gold discovered at the ancient port city of Pyrgi. 2 are written in Etruscan, 1 in Phoenician. The Phoenician version, a dedication to the goddess Astarte, helped scholars partially translate the Etruscan text alongside it. It was a major breakthrough, yet still left the deeper structure and lexicon of the language elusive. Could the Etruscan language be a relic of an older linguistic world? A surviving strand from a time before Indo-European tongues came to dominate Europe? Some propose it is related to languages like Raetic, found in the Alps, and Lemnian, forming what's called the Tersinian language family. But even if true, it raises a deeper mystery. What larger, now extinct linguistic landscape did these languages belong to? More speculative theories abound. Some suggest a connection to the Minoan language of Crete, Linear A, still undeciphered and equally enigmatic. Others point to the Basque language of northern Spain, another linguistic isolate, as a distant cousin. No link has been proven. And then there are those who venture into the realm of lost civilizations, that the Etruscans were remnants of a pre-flood culture, or refugees from Atlantis, stories with no basis in archaeology, yet fueled by the simple truth that the known explanations remain incomplete. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the Etruscan mystery is not how little we know, but how much they influenced the world that followed. Rome itself owes a debt to the Etruscans. The early kings of Rome, Romulus, Numa, Tarquinius Priscus, either were Etruscan or ruled in Etruscan fashion. The arch, the toga, the rituals of augury, and even the Latin alphabet came in part through Etruscan mediation. Yet, as Roman power rose, the Etruscan cities fell, assimilated, conquered, forgotten. Their language faded, their temples crumbled, and their names, except for a few, like Lars Porsena or Tanaquil, vanished from common memory. By the time of the late Republic, few could even read the inscriptions still carved into old tombs. And today, as archaeologists unearth tomb after tomb, each with funerary texts and names, the question lingers: what would the Etruscans tell us about their gods, their origin myths, their cosmology, if we could only understand their words? The cities are still there, buried under fields and vineyards. Their artworks fill museums. Their inscriptions lie catalogued and half-translated. We walk among the fragments of their world, but we listen and hear only echoes. What language did they speak around the hearth at night? What stories did their poets tell? What secrets did they carry from their ancestors? Secrets we can no longer read? The mystery of the Etruscan language remains a key that has yet to turn. And perhaps, just beneath the soil of Italy, the answers still wait, in stone, in gold, or on parchment, waiting for someone one day to give the Etruscans their voice again. From the lost syllables of the Etruscans, still etched in stone yet silent in meaning, we travel now to a place where silence was once shattered by ritual, by spectacle, and by fear. Here, in the heart of ancient Mesoamerica, we find a different kind of monument, one not to the gods of wind or war, but to death itself. It is called the Tzompantli, a wall of skulls. Beneath the city streets of modern-day Mexico City, where cars rumble and footsteps echo off colonial facades, lies the buried capital of the Mexica, or Aztecs, Tenochtitlan. At its center stood the Templo Mayor, the towering pyramid that marked the axis of their universe, the spiritual and political heart of a civilization that rose and fell, with a complexity still not fully understood. In 2015, during excavations just off the edge of the old sacred precinct, archaeologists uncovered something both horrifying and fascinating. Embedded in the stone foundations were hundreds of human skulls, stacked, mortared, arranged. This was not a burial site. It was a structure of terror and reverence, a Tzompantli, or skull rack. Skulls pierced by wooden poles, mounted for all to see. Evidence suggests these towers could rise as high as 60 meters long and several meters high, showcasing thousands of skulls at a time. Some were warriors, others were captives, and still others bore signs of ritual sacrifice. But here's the mystery. Who built the first Tzompantli? And why did the practice vanish so completely, almost without trace, in the centuries before European contact? The most famous Tzompantli was built by the Mexica in the 14th and 15th centuries, but archaeological evidence suggests the tradition predates them by centuries. Earlier civilizations across Mesoamerica, such as the Toltecs, Zapotecs, and even the Maya, displayed skulls in ceremonial fashion. Glyphs carved at Chichen Itza depict rows of impaled heads. Fragments found at Zapotec sites suggest a similar reverence for the head as a ritual object. So who began this practice? We don't know. There is no origin myth recorded, no single site identified as the first. The builders left no inscriptions, no explicit instructions, only fragments of bone, architecture, and symbols. Even their identity, if it was one group or many, has faded into the haze of pre-Columbian antiquity. Some scholars argue that Tzompantli was not a singular cultural product, but rather a shared symbol, a sacred language of death and power adopted across civilizations. In this view, it wasn't about terror, but transformation. The skulls did not simply represent the fallen, they embodied sacrifice, the transfer of life from mortal to divine. Others disagree. They point to the public placement of the racks, directly beside major temples and marketplaces, suggesting political theater as much as religion. A display of dominance, a warning to enemies, a reminder of divine authority reinforced through blood. And yet, the builders of these early skull racks, the ones who first raised wood and bone into sacred geometry, are absent from the records, vanished before history could catch their names. Were they a forgotten people whose cities lie buried beneath jungle or desert? Were they spiritual specialists, wandering from temple to temple, spreading a dark ritual craft lost to time? Or were the Tzompantli not just a structure, but a legacy? A ritual adopted, adapted, and then abandoned when new powers rose? The Mexica are often blamed or praised for codifying human sacrifice at a scale unparalleled in Mesoamerica. But even they spoke of older peoples, more ancient gods, forgotten rites. Their myths recalled ancestral cities swallowed by time, and rulers who communed with underworld forces. Could the Tzompantli have been one of those ancient inheritances, something the Mexica inherited, but never truly originated? There are other mysteries as well. Recent excavations have revealed that not all the skulls in the Tzompantli belonged to warriors. Some were women. Some, alarmingly, were children. Were they captives? Volunteers? Chosen ones? The Spanish chroniclers, arriving in the 16th century, described the Tzompantli with horror. Bernal Diaz del Castillo wrote of a terrifying wall of skulls, mounted with such precision and number that they could not count them all. But these accounts were often filtered through religious judgment and cultural misunderstanding. To the builders of these grim monuments, the act may not have been one of cruelty, but of cosmic necessity. Blood was the currency of balance, death, a gift to the gods, life, a cycle written in bone. And yet, even with this powerful role in sacred life, the builders themselves disappeared. By the time of the Spanish conquest, the Tzompantli were already rare. The Mexica kept the tradition alive longer than most, but even theirs was declining, buried beneath new political structures, changing alliances, and shifting beliefs. No one knows where the original Tzompantli stood. No one knows who cut the first skull or whispered the first prayer of sacrifice. No legend tells us who taught this gruesome craft or why it eventually ended. Was there a cultural turning point, an internal reckoning with the scale of death? Did a religious reformer arise, quietly pulling his people from the shadows of bone and offering new rituals? Or was it simply the march of time, an old way lost in a changing world? The skeletal remains uncovered in downtown Mexico City are silent. They bear no symbols of identity, no markers of their builders' names. Only sockets where eyes once stared into ceremony. Only jaws, parted as if caught in final invocation. And so, the mystery lingers. What drove a people to shape monuments of the dead? Who were the architects of these chilling altars? And why, after centuries of blood and reverence, did the Tzompantli fall silent? Perhaps their builders wanted to be forgotten. Or perhaps they wait, deep beneath the stones, for someone to remember them again. From the chilling silence of the skull racks, Tzompantli, we move northward through time and space to the highlands of central Mexico. The air grows thinner. The terrain hardens to volcanic stone and dry brush. Here, in the windswept basin of Tula de Allende, massive stone warriors rise from a temple platform, motionless, solemn, and silent. They are the Atlantean figures of Tula. Each stands over 15 feet tall, carved from solid basalt, wearing feathered headdresses and carrying what may have been atlatls or fire serpents. Their expressions are stoic, timeless, watchful. Behind them, remnants of pyramids, ball courts, and colonnades lie broken under the sun. This was once the capital of the Toltecs. But who the Toltecs truly were, and why they disappeared, remains one of Mesoamerica's most enduring and puzzling mysteries. The name Toltec comes from the Nahuatl word Toltecatl, meaning artisan or master builder. In Aztec tradition, they were remembered not just as a civilization, but as a cultural ideal, mythic ancestors of order, knowledge, and divine craftsmanship. The Aztecs revered them, claimed descent from them, and often cited Toltec authority to legitimize their own power. But is this reverence rooted in historical memory or mythology? Archaeologists agree that the Toltecs were a real people and that their capital, Tula or Tallinn, reached its peak between roughly 900 and 1150 AD. They emerged in the power vacuum left by the fall of Teotihuacan, a vast metropolis whose collapse centuries earlier had shaken the Mesoamerican world. From Tula, the Toltecs established a network of influence stretching across central Mexico and possibly beyond. Their architectural style, columned halls, chacmool statues, and serpent motifs, spread far and wide. Their militaristic imagery, combined with religious symbolism, suggests a society where warfare and divine ritual were deeply intertwined. And then, they vanished. By the early 12th century, Tula was in decline. By the 13th, it was abandoned. The reasons remain unclear. Unlike Teotihuacan, which left behind vast murals and planned urban sprawl, the Toltecs left fragments. Their art is powerful but sparse. Their texts are few, and the timeline of their collapse is blurred by myth and conquest. What caused the Toltec civilization to fall? Was it war, drought, internal rebellion, or something less tangible? Cultural dissolution, a loss of cohesion, of meaning? Mainstream archaeological theories suggest a combination of environmental stress and political instability. Evidence points to a severe drought during the 11th and 12th centuries that may have crippled agriculture and strained society. There are signs of fire and destruction in Tula's final phases, perhaps from civil unrest or invasion. Some researchers propose that rival factions within the ruling elite led to fragmentation, a power struggle that unraveled the complex web of Toltec rule. Others argue that rising cities to the south, like Cholula or the early Mexica groups, may have played a role in destabilizing Toltec hegemony. But even these theories leave gaps, because unlike the Maya or the Aztecs, we have almost no surviving Toltec texts, no codices, no inscriptions that tell their story from their own perspective. Instead, we rely on Aztec accounts, written centuries later under colonial influence, where the Toltecs are portrayed as semi-divine sages, wielders of magic and knowledge. Legendary figures like Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent deity, are said to have walked among them as kings. Did the Toltecs deify their rulers in life? Or did later cultures mythologize their memory, blending truth and fable? And then there is the matter of their legacy. Toltec-style architecture appears as far away as Chichen Itza in the Yucatan Peninsula. The famous Temple of the Warriors there bears uncanny similarities to the layout of Tula: columns, Atlantean statues, chacmools lying flat, their bowls ready for offerings. This has led some to theorize that the Toltecs expanded far beyond central Mexico, or that they merged with the Maya during a period of cultural exchange or conquest. But others are skeptical. Could these similarities instead represent a shared symbolic language? A cross-regional elite culture? Or were the later Maya mimicking Toltec forms to invoke ancient prestige? More speculative theories abound. Some suggest that the Toltecs were not a singular ethnic group but a cultural tradition, an identity adopted by multiple city-states to signify power and legitimacy. In this view, Toltec was more akin to civilized or divinely favored, rather than a specific people. Others reach further, invoking ancient cataclysms, hidden migrations, or esoteric knowledge passed down through Toltec priest kings. Fringe theories speak of lost archives, advanced knowledge, or even extraterrestrial contact, ideas that, while popularized in pseudo-scientific circles, are unsupported by evidence. Still, they reflect a deeper yearning to explain how a culture so revered could vanish so completely. Why did the Toltecs not leave behind a clearer record? Why did their cities fall so silently, without the dramatic collapses seen elsewhere in Mesoamerica? Perhaps they did not disappear suddenly at all. Perhaps the Toltec civilization dissolved into the very fabric of the societies that followed, their myths absorbed, their names rewritten, their temples reused, their gods renamed. Even the Aztec term Tolan, meaning place of reeds, was applied to multiple legendary cities: Tula, Teotihuacan, even Cholula. It became less a place than an idea, a memory, a symbol of origin. But beneath that symbolism lies a real past, real people, real architects, warriors, priests, and farmers. And we still don't know what happened to them. Were they overthrown, absorbed, or undone by their own hand? Tula remains half-excavated. Much of the ancient city lies beneath farmland and modern development. New discoveries could yet emerge: buried ceramics, lost murals, even written records sealed in tombs. Until then, the Toltecs remain somewhere between history and legend, remembered by those who came after, but still whispering their own story from the shadows of the stones. From the stone pillars of Tula and the silent legacy of the Toltecs, we shift east, across deserts and mountain ranges where the heat of day gives way to winds that have long forgotten names. Here, in the heartlands of ancient Persia, among the dusty plains and weather-worn ruins, a question lies buried beneath centuries of silence. Where is the tomb of Cyrus the Younger? Not to be confused with Cyrus the Great, founder of the Achaemenid Empire, whose solemn tomb still stands at Pasargadae. Cyrus the Younger was a prince, a general, and a would-be king whose ambition shook the empire itself. His fate is known. His grave is not. The story begins in the 5th century BC, in the era of dynastic struggle and shifting power. Cyrus the Younger was the second son of Darius II and the younger brother of Artaxerxes II. While Artaxerxes inherited the throne, Cyrus harbored ambitions of his own, and in 401 BC, he launched one of the most daring bids for power in ancient history. With a multi-ethnic army of Persian troops, Levantine mercenaries, and over 10,000 Greek hoplites, Cyrus marched from western Anatolia into the heart of Mesopotamia. His goal: to seize the throne from his brother. The decisive confrontation came at Cunaxa, just north of Babylon. Cyrus fought valiantly and nearly succeeded, but in the confusion of battle he was killed, reportedly by a single blow to the temple, and with that, the rebellion crumbled. But while history records the moment of his death, it remains entirely silent about what came after. There is no known monument to Cyrus the Younger, no mausoleum, no funerary inscription, no known location for his remains. A prince of Persia, dead in the heart of the empire, and yet his final resting place has vanished from the map of history. How is that possible? Some ancient sources offer brief hints. Xenophon, the Greek mercenary and historian who accompanied Cyrus and later authored the Anabasis, describes the battle in vivid detail. But he offers no mention of a burial. He writes that the Greek army searched for Cyrus's body on the battlefield. It was found, mutilated, and returned to Artaxerxes. After that, silence. Was Cyrus buried with honor by his brother, his enemy? Was he denied a royal tomb as punishment for treason? Or was he laid to rest in secret by loyal followers, far from the courts of power? Mainstream historians have long speculated that Cyrus's remains were returned to Persia, perhaps to his birthplace or to one of the sacred royal necropolises. But there is no trace of such a tomb in Pasargadae, Nakhche Rustam, or Susa, where many other Achaemenid rulers were honored in rock-cut tombs or palatial graves. Others suggest his body may have been buried near Cunaxa, perhaps hastily, amid the dust and ruins of defeat. Yet no tomb has ever been identified in the area around the ancient battle site, modern-day Iraq, where archaeological work has been hampered by time, war, and political instability. And then there are more speculative possibilities. Some fringe researchers propose that Cyrus's burial was deliberately concealed by his own generals, hidden to protect his body from desecration by the court of Artaxerxes. A few even point to potential links between lost Persian tombs and Greek sanctuaries, wondering whether remnants of his cult or memory survived in unexpected places. But these theories are fragments, unproven, uncorroborated, lost in the haze of competing interpretations. Could his tomb lie beneath an unexcavated mound in southwestern Iran? Could it have been built into a cliff face, like the majestic tombs of Persepolis, now weathered and indistinguishable from natural stone? Or more provocatively, could it have been intentionally erased from memory? We know that Persian kings carefully curated royal memory. Monumental tombs were not simply graves, they were political declarations, carved high above the desert as eternal symbols of legitimacy. Cyrus the Great's tomb was revered, Darius's tomb was monumental, but Cyrus the Younger was a rebel, a usurper, a brother who dared challenge the divine right of a king. Would Artaxerxes have permitted his tomb to stand? It's possible, perhaps even likely, that any such monument was deliberately destroyed, or never built at all. That his story was preserved only in the writings of foreigners, Greeks who admired his bravery, if not his politics. Within the Persian court, Cyrus's name may have been spoken only in whispers, and then, not at all. And yet, the silence surrounding his tomb only magnifies his legend. Cyrus the Younger was not a king, but he nearly was. His failed revolt altered the course of Persian and Greek history. The retreat of the 10,000, immortalized in Xenophon's Anabasis, inspired generations of warriors and adventurers, and still, somewhere, perhaps in the riverbeds of Mesopotamia or the forgotten valleys of ancient Elam, his body lies, undiscovered. No inscription tells us where. No stone marks the site, only the wind and the earth and the memory of a name. What might we find if his tomb were uncovered? Would it contain inscriptions, weapons, signs of loyalty from followers who dared defy the empire? Would it tell us more about the man who nearly changed history? Or would it offer only more silence, one more echo in the vast, unsolved chorus of the ancient world? The tomb of Cyrus the Younger remains lost, but perhaps, like so many of history's great absences, it waits, hidden beneath sand, stone, and time, for the right eyes to see it. As the dust of Persian plains settles over the forgotten tomb of Cyrus the Younger, we journey now south, across the Horn of Africa, beyond the Great Rift Valley, into the highlands of southern Zimbabwe. Here, rising unexpectedly from the rugged savanna, stand stone walls without mortar. Great arcs of granite curve into ancient silence, enclosing passageways that twist like memories and mysteries. This is Great Zimbabwe, a ruined city whose very existence challenges long-held assumptions about African antiquity. Its grandeur was once denied by colonial voices. Today, it stands as both a symbol of African engineering and a question mark carved into stone. But among the many enigmas surrounding this site, one mystery gleams above all. What became of the gold that once flowed so richly from this land? Constructed between the 11th and 15th centuries AD, Great Zimbabwe was the capital of a powerful kingdom that commanded vast trade routes stretching from the interior of southern Africa to the Swahili coast, and beyond to Arabia, Persia, and even China. Arab traders described a place of great wealth, where gold was abundant, mined in the hills and exchanged for glass beads, porcelain, and luxury goods. The Portuguese, arriving later, heard tales of cities paved in gold and sought them with the desperation of men chasing myth. Archaeological excavations in and around Great Zimbabwe have confirmed the city's connection to gold. Artifacts of smelting, fragments of crucibles, and tools for refining the metal have been found within its walls. Traders' records from Kilwa and Sofala speak of inland caravans carrying bars of gold, and for centuries, this wealth sustained a complex society of builders, artisans, rulers, and merchants. But here lies the riddle. If Great Zimbabwe once controlled vast gold mines, where are they? There are no documented major gold mines within the city's walls. None of the dramatic shafts or deep tunnels seen in other ancient gold-producing cultures. No great royal treasury uncovered. The tools and traces exist, but the main source, the true origin of the gold, has vanished. Several hills in the surrounding region, particularly near the Sabi and Runde rivers, have been identified as possible sources. Ancient diggings, now filled with soil and overgrowth, suggest some small-scale extraction. But these alone cannot explain the scale of trade described by Arab geographers or the wealth that supported a stone city rising from African bedrock. Could the original gold veins have been exhausted? Possibly. But geological surveys suggest the region remains mineral-rich. Modern gold mining continues in parts of Zimbabwe, often in areas not directly linked to Great Zimbabwe's ancient sphere. So why did the old workings disappear or fall silent? One theory suggests that the people of Great Zimbabwe deliberately kept their mining operations small and scattered, relying on alluvial deposits, gold flakes panned from riverbeds or extracted with simple tools. This would leave behind fewer traces than the grand tunnels of Egyptian or Roman mines. The gold, in this case, might never have come from massive operations, but from many small-scale sites, each fading back into the land over time. Others believe the mines were concealed, or deliberately destroyed, after the fall of the kingdom in the 15th century. As rival powers rose and Portuguese ambitions reached inland, the custodians of Zimbabwe's wealth may have hidden their sources to protect them. Oral traditions tell of sacred hills, cursed valleys, and guardian spirits who punish intruders. Could some remnants of those gold mines lie under taboo ground, never disturbed, never explored? Then there are more speculative ideas. Some fringe researchers have drawn parallels between Great Zimbabwe and the biblical Ophir, a legendary land of gold visited by King Solomon's fleets. While most scholars dismiss this as unfounded, the persistence of the legend speaks to the allure surrounding this place. Even in the early 20th century, adventurers scoured the countryside hoping to find Solomon's mines beneath Zimbabwe's dust. Still others suggest that Great Zimbabwe was not the center of mining, but rather the hub of its trade. Perhaps the gold came from regions far to the west or south, funneled in through invisible routes and then exported along the Swahili coast. If so, then the true source may lie not in Zimbabwe, but in the distant valleys of Mozambique, Zambia, or beyond, lost to shifting borders and the passing of empires. But perhaps the most haunting possibility is this, that the gold is still there, beneath the earth, beneath our feet, hidden not by myth or memory, but by erosion, overgrowth, and time. Forgotten shafts collapsed into valleys, riverbeds changed by centuries of flood. What if the gold of Great Zimbabwe has simply been buried again, waiting? And what would we learn if we found it? Would we discover new layers of trade, industry, and technology in pre-colonial Africa? Would we rewrite our understanding of ancient African civilizations, not as passive recipients of foreign influence, but as dynamic creators of wealth and culture? Or would the discovery raise more questions than it answers? For now, the gold mines remain silent. Great Zimbabwe endures as a monumental riddle, its walls resisting time, its corridors echoing with whispers. The stone birds found at the site, iconic soapstone carvings once perched atop towers, look out over empty plains as though watching for something lost. We know the people here were master stoneworkers, skilled in trade, connected to global networks long before the age of European conquest. But the mines, the vaults, the origin of their glittering prosperity, those have vanished. What secrets still lie hidden beneath the hills? What treasures remain untouched beneath forest and soil? And who were the guardians of this wealth? A kingdom now mostly remembered through broken walls and scattered gold beads. The disappearance of the gold mines of Great Zimbabwe is more than a story of economics. It's a mystery of memory, power, and silence. And until the ground speaks again, we can only wonder what lies buried in the shadows of stone.